A dying woman collapses into the arms of New York's most feared mafia king beneath the Christmas lights of Grand Central Terminal. Rachel Vale, once a brilliant medical student, has been hunted, branded, and drained by a secret blood trafficking syndicate for months. Kael Min, known as the Psycho, thought he destroyed the organization 2 years ago until he sees the burn mark on her cheek. Now a silent war erupts beneath Manhattan streets as two broken survivors discover their bloodlines are connected by a forbidden romance buried decades deep. Like this video, comment the city you're watching from, and follow this story to the end. You won't believe where this goes. Bam? The mop handle slipped from Rachel Vale's fingers and clattered against the marble floor of Grand Central Terminal. She bent to retrieve it, and the world tilted sideways. Her knees buckled. The ceiling arched high above her head, decorated with constellations painted in gold leaf, and for a moment she thought she might actually pass out right there beneath Pisces and Aries, while Christmas shoppers rushed past her like she didn't exist. She grabbed the handle again, steadied herself, forced her legs to lock. The bucket beside her was half full of dirty water that smelled like disinfectant and old pennies. Her reflection rippled across the surface, gaunt face, hollow eyes, a jagged scar running from her left temple to her jawline. The burn mark on her right cheek was hidden beneath a layer of foundation she'd stolen from a CVS 3 weeks ago, but she could still feel it throbbing beneath the makeup like a second heartbeat. Property of the Circle. That's what the brand meant. That's what she'd become. Rachel dragged the mop across the floor in long, uneven strokes. Her supervisor, a heavy-set man named Eddie who smelled like cigars and didn't ask questions, had hired her 2 months ago for cash under the table. No background check, no references. Just show up at 11 p.m. and clean the East Corridor before the morning commuters arrived. She'd been doing it ever since, moving through the terminal like a ghost, invisible to everyone except the homeless man who slept near the oyster bar and sometimes asked her for spare change. She never had any to give him. The Christmas lights strung along the terminal's massive windows reflected off the polished marble, casting red and green shadows across the floor. Somewhere near the information booth, a small choir was singing carols. Their voices echoed through the vaulted space, beautiful and distant, like something from a life Rachel used to live. She used to love Christmas, used to buy gifts for her roommates and bake cookies that always turned out slightly burnt, used to video call her parents in Boston and pretend she wasn't exhausted from 70-hour weeks at the hospital. That was before. Before the night she had left the library at Mount Sinai and noticed the same black sedan following her for 6 blocks. Before the men in surgical masks dragged her into an alley and jabbed a needle into her neck. Before she woke up in a concrete room with an IV in her arm and realized she wasn't going to medical school anymore. She was going to die there. Rachel's vision blurred. She stopped mopping and leaned against the handle, trying to catch her breath. Her heart was racing too fast. Her hands were trembling. She'd felt this way 3 times in the past week. Dizzy, weak, like her body was shutting down one system at a time. She knew what it meant. They'd taken too much blood. For 6 months, the Circle had drained her twice a week in a facility buried somewhere beneath the Bronx. She never saw daylight, never saw faces, just surgical lights and needles and the steady drip of her blood filling bag after bag, while a voice on an intercom told her to stay still or they'd sedate her again. They called her RH Null, the golden blood, rarest type on Earth. Rachel hadn't known what that meant until a doctor, one of the few who'd spoken to her like she was human, explained it in clipped, clinical terms. Her blood could save lives, could be sold for $50,000 per unit, could keep powerful people alive when no other donor matched. She was worth more empty than whole. The escape had been an accident, a power outage during a winter storm. Locked doors suddenly unlocked. Rachel had run through pitch-black hallways in a hospital gown and bare feet, following the sound of traffic until she found a service tunnel that led to a subway station. She'd stolen clothes from a donation bin, slept in the tunnels beneath Grand Central for weeks before Eddie offered her the job. And now, 2 months later, she was still here, still hiding, still waiting for the day the Circle found her again. Because they would. People like her didn't just disappear. Rachel forced herself to keep moving. The mop made wet streaks across the marble. Her arms ached. Her legs felt like they were made of glass, fragile and ready to shatter. She was halfway to the Vanderbilt Avenue exit when the dizziness hit again, harder this time, like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. She stumbled forward, dropped the mop, tried to grab the edge of a stone bench, but missed, and then she was falling. The marble rushed up to meet her face. She braced for impact. It never came. Someone caught her. Strong hands gripped her shoulders and pulled her upright before she hit the ground. Rachel gasped and tried to push away, panic flooding her nervous system, but the hands held firm, not rough, just steady, unyielding. Easy. The voice was low, male, controlled. "I've got you." Rachel blinked hard, trying to force her vision into focus. The man holding her was tall, well over 6 feet, with black hair swept back from a sharp, angular face. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire year of tuition, tailored perfectly across his shoulders. His eyes were dark, unreadable, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She knew that look. She'd seen it before in the faces of the men who'd examined her like livestock. "I'm fine," Rachel said quickly, pulling away from his grip. Her voice came out hoarse. "I'm fine, just dizzy, low blood sugar." The man didn't let go. His gaze dropped to her wrists, where the sleeves of her janitor's uniform had ridden up, exposing the faint scars left behind by months of IV needles. Then his eyes moved to her face, to the burn mark on her cheek, barely hidden beneath smudged foundation. His expression didn't change. But something behind his eyes went very, very cold. "Who did this to you?" he asked quietly. Rachel's pulse spiked. She yanked her arms free and stepped back, nearly tripping over the mop bucket. "Nobody." I said, "I'm fine." "You're not fine." The man's voice was calm, factual, like he was diagnosing a problem. "You're malnourished, anemic, and someone burned a mark into your face." Rachel's chest tightened. She looked around frantically, searching for Eddie or security or anyone who might interrupt this conversation, but the corridor was empty. The choir's voices echoed faintly from the main hall, singing something about peace on earth. "I need to get back to work," she said. "No," the man said. "You need a hospital." "I don't need anything." Rachel's voice cracked. She hated how weak she sounded, hated that her hands were shaking. "Just leave me alone." The man studied her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a phone. Rachel's heart stopped. She thought about running, thought about screaming, but her legs wouldn't move. He tapped the screen twice and held it up so she could see. It was a photo of a symbol, a perfect circle intersected by 3 lines, arranged like the spokes of a wheel. The same symbol branded into Rachel's cheek. "Where did you see this?" the man asked. Rachel couldn't breathe. The terminal spun around her. Her vision tunneled. "I asked you a question." His voice was still calm, but there was something lethal underneath it now, something that made her survival instincts scream. "I don't know what that is," Rachel whispered. "Yes, you do." The man stepped closer. "That mark on your face says you do." Rachel's knees gave out again. This time, the man caught her before she hit the floor and lifted her into his arms like she weighed nothing. She tried to struggle, tried to push him away, but her body had stopped responding to commands. "Put me down," she managed to say. "No." "I'll scream." "Go ahead." But she didn't. Because somewhere deep in the part of her brain still capable of rational thought, Rachel realized something terrifying. This man wasn't going to hurt her. He was going to save her, and that was almost worse. Because people who saved you always wanted something in return. The man carried her through the terminal toward an exit Rachel had never used before. She caught glimpses of the main hall as they passed, the famous clock, the holiday decorations, the travelers rushing toward their trains. None of them looked twice at the well-dressed man carrying an unconscious janitor through the station. People saw what they wanted to see, and right now Rachel was invisible. The cold air outside hit her like a slap. Snow was falling in thick, heavy flakes, covering the streets in white. A black SUV idled at the curb, engine running. The rear door opened before they reached it. "Wait," Rachel said weakly. "Where are you taking me?" The man didn't answer. He slid into the back seat with Rachel still in his arms and pulled the door shut behind them. The interior was warm, leather-scented, soundproofed. A privacy screen separated them from the driver. Rachel tried to sit up, failed. Her head lolled against the man's shoulder. "Who are you?" she whispered. The man finally looked down at her. His face was unreadable, carved from stone. "Kael Min," he said. The name hit Rachel like a physical blow. She'd heard it before, whispered in the facility, spoken with fear by the guards who thought she was unconscious. Kael Min, the psycho. The man who'd allegedly massacred an entire criminal organization 2 years ago and walked away without a single arrest. "You're going to kill me," Rachel said. It wasn't a question. Kael's expression didn't change. "No." "Then what do you want?" "I want to know who's still alive." His voice was flat, emotionless. 2 years ago, I burned the circle to the ground. I killed everyone connected to it. Every doctor, every trafficker, every buyer. I watched them die. Rachel's breath caught. "But you're here," Kael continued. "Which means I missed someone." The SUV pulled away from the curb and merged into late-night traffic. Rachel watched the lights of Grand Central disappear through the tinted windows, her last connection to the world she'd been hiding in vanishing into the snow. "I don't know anything," she said. "You know enough." Kael shifted her weight slightly, adjusting his grip. "That brand on your face is a death sentence. The circle doesn't mark people unless they're high-value assets, which means your blood is worth something." Rachel closed her eyes. She was so tired of running, so tired of being afraid. "We're null," she whispered. Kael went very still. "What did you say?" "That's what they called it. Golden blood, 1 in 6 million. Rachel's voice was barely audible. "They said I could save lives. They said I was rare." Kael didn't respond for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, quieter, but somehow more dangerous. "How long were you inside?" 6 months. "How often did they take blood?" "Twice a week. Sometimes more." "How much?" "I don't know. I stopped counting." Kael swore under his breath in Korean. It was the first crack Rachel had seen in his composure. "You should be dead," he said. "I know." The SUV turned onto a street Rachel didn't recognize. Through the windows, she could see the city changing, older buildings giving way to sleek glass towers, the kind of neighborhood where people paid $50 for brunch and didn't blink. "Where are we going?" Rachel asked again. "Somewhere safe." "There's no such thing." Kael looked down at her, and for the first time, something almost human flickered across his face. "There is now." The SUV stopped in front of a residential building that stretched 40 stories into the night sky. The entrance was guarded by 2 men in dark suits who stepped aside the moment they saw Kael. Inside, the lobby was all white marble and modern art, the kind of place Rachel used to walk past and wonder what it was like to live somewhere that clean. Kael carried her to a private elevator. His fingerprint unlocked it. The doors closed, and the elevator shot upward so smoothly Rachel barely felt the motion. "I need to call someone," she said. "My parents, they think I'm dead." "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because if the circle is still operating, they're watching everything. Your parents' phone, your old apartment, every place you used to go." Kael's voice was matter-of-fact. "If you contact them now, you'll lead the circle straight to them." Rachel's throat tightened. She hadn't thought of that, hadn't thought past the desperate need to hear her mother's voice. "Then what do I do?" she whispered. "You stay alive," Kael said, "and you help me find the people who did this to you." The elevator stopped at the top floor. The doors opened directly into a penthouse that made Rachel's brain short-circuit. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. The furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything was black, white, or chrome, expensive and cold and utterly devoid of anything that felt like home. Kael set her down on a leather sofa. Rachel's legs barely supported her weight. "Don't move," he said. He disappeared through a doorway. Rachel sat alone in the massive living room, trying to process what was happening. Trying to understand why Kael Min, a man allegedly responsible for dozens of murders, had just carried her out of Grand Central like she was something worth saving. Kael returned a few minutes later with an older man in a white coat. The man had kind eyes and the calm efficiency of someone who'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. "This is Dr. Han," Kael said. "He's going to examine you." Rachel flinched backward. No doctors." "He's not one of them," Kael said firmly. "He works for me." "I don't care. I'm not—" "Rachel," Kael's voice cut through her panic. "Look at me." She did. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, she met his eyes. "I'm not going to let anyone hurt you," Kael said. "Not again." There was something in his voice, something raw and almost vulnerable, that made Rachel stop fighting. She didn't trust him, didn't trust anyone. But standing in that penthouse with nowhere left to run, she realized she didn't have a choice. Dr. Han worked quickly and gently. He took her vitals, drew blood for tests, examined the scars on her arms and the burn on her face. He didn't ask questions, didn't make her explain. Just worked in silence while Kael stood nearby, watching with the stillness of a predator. When Dr. Han finished, he spoke quietly to Kael in Korean. Rachel caught fragments, dangerous, transfusion, months of recovery, but most of it was too fast for her to follow. Kael's jaw tightened. "What did he say?" Rachel asked. Kael looked at her. "You're severely anemic. Your iron levels are dangerously low. If you'd collapsed anywhere else tonight, you probably would have died." Rachel laughed bitterly. "Good thing you were there then. Good thing I was looking." "Looking for what?" Kael didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the windows and stared out at the city, his hands shoved into his pockets. 2 years ago, he said slowly, I found out the circle was trafficking women for blood. Rare types, high-value donors. They were running an underground network, corrupt doctors, dirty cops, offshore buyers. I spent 6 months tracking them down. Rachel's skin went cold. I killed every single person involved, Kael continued. Burned their facilities, shut down their supply lines. I thought I'd destroyed them completely. He turned to face her. But then you show up with their brand on your face, he said, which means someone survived, someone rebuilt, and they've been operating right under my nose for 2 years. Rachel's hands started shaking again. Why do you care? You're a criminal. You kill people. I kill people who deserve it, Kael said quietly. The circle doesn't just kill. They torture. They drain. They turn human beings into products. And that bothers you? Kael's eyes went dark. My sister had Rh null blood. The past tense hit Rachel like a punch to the chest. Had? She whispered. They took her when she was 16, Kael said. By the time I found her, she'd been bled out so many times her organs were failing. She died in my arms. Rachel couldn't breathe. So yes, Kael said. It bothers me. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Snow fell silently against the windows. The city glittered below them, oblivious. I can't stay here, Rachel finally said. You don't have anywhere else to go. I'll figure something out. You'll die. Kael's voice was flat. You can barely stand. You have no money, no ID, no support system, and the circle is still looking for you. Then what do you want from me? Kael crossed the room and crouched in front of her so they were eye level. Up close, Rachel could see the faint scars along his knuckles, the cold intelligence in his dark eyes. I want names, he said. Faces, locations, everything you remember about the facility where they kept you. And if I give you that information, I'll destroy them, Kael said simply. Again, permanently this time. Rachel studied his face, searching for the lie. But there was nothing there except absolute certainty. And what happens to me? She asked. You heal, Kael said. You get strong, and then you decide what kind of life you want to live. It sounded too good to be true. It sounded like a fantasy, but Rachel was so tired of running. Okay, she whispered. Kael stood. Dr. Han is setting up a room for you. Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow. He started to walk away, but Rachel's voice stopped him. Kael. He turned. Why did you catch me? Rachel asked. In the terminal. You could have just walked past. Kael was quiet for a long moment. Because I've spent 2 years looking for proof the circle survived, he said. And the moment I saw that brand on your face, I knew I'd finally found it. He left without another word. Rachel sat alone in the massive penthouse, her body exhausted, her mind racing. Through the windows, she could see the lights of the city spreading out in every direction, millions of people living their lives, unaware of the darkness lurking beneath the surface. Somewhere out there, the circle was still operating, and now Rachel was about to become the weapon that destroyed them. Dr. Han returned and led her to a bedroom that was bigger than her entire apartment in medical school. Silk sheets, blackout curtains, a bathroom with heated floors. Rachel collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. For the first time in 6 months, she felt safe enough to cry. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the concrete room with needles in her arms and voices telling her to stay still. She lay in the darkness and listened to the muffled sounds of the penthouse. Footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing, the low murmur of conversation in Korean. Somewhere around 3 a.m, her door opened quietly. Rachel's eyes snapped open. She sat up, heart pounding. Kael stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway. He wasn't wearing a suit anymore, just dark pants and a t-shirt that revealed the edges of tattoos running down both arms. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Rachel shook her head. Kael stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. He didn't turn on the lights, just crossed to the window and stood there, staring out at the city the same way he had earlier. "You should try," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be hard." "Why?" "Because I'm going to ask you to remember everything." Rachel's stomach twisted. "I don't want to remember." "I know." Kael's voice was softer now, almost gentle. "But it's the only way we find them." Rachel pulled her knees to her chest. "What if I can't?" "Then we start with what you do remember," Kael said, "and we build from there." He turned to face her, and in the dim light from the window, Rachel could see the exhaustion written into his features, the kind of tiredness that came from years of violence and guilt. "You don't have to do this alone," Kael said quietly. "Why are you helping me?" Rachel asked. The question had been eating at her since Grand Central. "You don't know me. I'm nobody." Kael was silent for a long moment. "You're not nobody," he finally said. "You're the proof I needed." "Proof of what?" "That I failed." Kael's voice was barely audible. "I thought I'd killed everyone, thought I'd ended it. But you were suffering while I was convincing myself the war was over." Rachel's throat tightened. "I don't need your guilt," she said. "I know." Kael moved toward the door. "But you're getting it anyway." He left before Rachel could respond. She lay back down and stared at the ceiling, her mind spinning. Kael Min was not what she'd expected. He was cold, yes, dangerous, absolutely. But there was something broken underneath the control, something that recognized the same brokenness in her. Maybe that's why he'd caught her. Not because she was proof the circle survived, but because saving her meant he could finally stop failing his sister. Rachel closed her eyes and tried to sleep. This time, the darkness didn't pull her under. It just waited. When morning finally came, Rachel woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of voices in the next room. She dragged herself out of bed and found clean clothes laid out on a chair, jeans, a sweater, socks, all in her size. She showered for the first time in weeks, scrubbing away months of grime and fear until her skin turned red. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized the person staring back. The scar on her face was still there, the burn mark still visible, but her eyes looked different, less haunted, more alive. Rachel dressed and walked into the main living area. Kael was sitting at a glass table with 2 other men, all of them speaking in rapid Korean. Maps and documents were spread across the surface. Kael looked up when she entered. "Sit," he said, gesturing to an empty chair. Rachel sat. One of the men, a stocky guy with a scar across his eyebrow, slid a plate of food toward her. Toast, eggs, fruit. Her stomach growled. "Eat first," Kael said. "Then we talk." Rachel ate slowly, aware of the 3 men watching her. She felt like a specimen under glass. When she finished, Kael pushed a notepad and pen across the table. "Start from the beginning," he said. "The night they took you. What do you remember?" Rachel's hands tightened around the pen. "I was leaving the library," she said quietly. "Around 11 p.m. I noticed a car following me." "Make?" "Model." "Black sedan." "I don't know cars." "How many men?" "3. Maybe 4. They grabbed me in an alley near the hospital. One of them had a needle." Kael made notes in precise, controlled handwriting. "What happened when you woke up?" Rachel's voice shook. "I was in a room, concrete walls, no windows. There was an IV in my arm and a bag filling with my blood." "How long before you saw a face?" "Days, maybe a week. They kept me sedated most of the time." "When you did see someone, what did they look like?" Rachel closed her eyes, forcing herself back into the memories she'd spent months trying to bury. There was a doctor. Older. White hair. He had an accent. Eastern European, maybe. Name? I never heard one. They called him Doc. Kael's jaw tightened. Anyone else? Guards. They rotated shifts. And a woman. Rachel's voice dropped. She's the one who burned me. The room went silent. Describe her, Kael said. Rachel's hand moved to her cheek instinctively. 30s, Asian, short black hair. She wore scrubs, but she wasn't medical. She was... Rachel's voice cracked. She was the one who decided which girls stayed and which ones disappeared. Kael exchanged a look with the scarred man. Her name? Kael asked. Dr. Yoon, Rachel whispered. That's what the guards called her. Kael's expression turned to stone. He stood abruptly and walked to the windows, his hands clenched into fists. The scarred man leaned forward. You're sure? Dr. Yoon? Rachel nodded. She's supposed to be dead, the man said quietly. Well, she's not, Rachel said. She's the one who runs everything now. Kael turned back to face them, and Rachel saw something terrifying in his eyes. Rage so deep and controlled it was almost surgical. Where's the facility? He asked. I don't know exactly. Underground, near trains. I could hear them every few hours. Metro North or Subway? Subway. The sound was too close. Kael pulled out his phone and started typing. How many others were there? Other women? Rachel's chest tightened. I saw 12, maybe more. They kept us separated. Did any of them escape with you? Rachel shook her head. The power went out. I ran. I don't know what happened to the others. Kael's phone buzzed. He read the screen and his expression darkened. What? The scarred man asked. 3 women with rare blood types reported missing in the last 6 months, Kael said. All from the tri-state area. All last seen near medical facilities. Rachel felt sick. They're still hunting, Kael said quietly. He looked at Rachel, and they're going to come for you the moment they realize you're alive. Then what do we do? Rachel asked. Kael's smile was cold and lethal. We hunt them first. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of maps, photographs, and conversations Rachel wished she could forget. Kael's penthouse transformed into a war room. The glass dining table disappeared beneath layers of satellite imagery showing every subway line in the Bronx. The scarred man, whose name was Jin, brought in a second computer and started cross-referencing missing persons reports with property records. A third man arrived on the second day, younger, with wire-frame glasses and the nervous energy of someone who'd spent too much time behind screens. Kael called him Min Jun. Rachel sat at the edge of it all, watching these men dissect her trauma like it was a puzzle to be solved. Here, Min Jun said, tapping a map sector northeast of Hunts Point, 3 abandoned industrial buildings within earshot of the 6th train, all purchased through shell corporations in the last 5 years. Kael leaned over the map, his eyes scanning the grid. Ownership. Traced back to a holding company in Delaware. But the original investor, Min Jun hesitated. It's complicated. Uncomplicated. Min Jun pushed his glasses up. The money came from offshore accounts tied to medical supply companies, legitimate businesses on paper. But the supply chain leads back to a single distributor. Name, Kael said. Hanoel Medical Group. The room went silent. Jin looked up sharply. That's impossible. Why? Rachel asked. No one answered her. Kael's face had gone completely blank, which Rachel was learning meant he was furious. Explain, Kael said quietly. Min Jun pulled up a new screen. Hanoel Medical Group is a pharmaceutical conglomerate based in Seoul. They specialize in blood products and rare disease treatment. The company is... He stopped. Say it, Kael said. It's owned by the Min family. Rachel felt the air leave the room. She looked at Kael, but he wasn't looking at anyone. He was staring at the screen like it had just told him the world was ending. That's not possible, Jin said again. Your father sold his stake in Hanoel 15 years ago, after your sister... I know when he sold it, Kael snapped. His voice was sharp enough to cut. Pull the current board of directors. Min Jun typed rapidly. A list of names appeared on the screen. Rachel didn't recognize any of them, except one. Min Jae-sung, Chairman Emeritus. Your father still owns 40%, Min Jun said quietly, through secondary holdings. He's been hiding it. Kael turned and walked to the windows. His hands were shaking. Rachel had never seen him lose control before, not even when she'd told him about Dr. Yoon, but now his shoulders were rigid, his breathing uneven. Kael, Jin said carefully, get out. We need to… I said get out. Kael's voice was lethal. Both of you, now. Jin and Minjun exchanged a glance, then gathered their laptops and left without another word. The door clicked shut behind them. Rachel sat frozen at the table, unsure whether she should leave too, but Kael spoke before she could move. You should go, he said. His back was still to her. Should I? Rachel asked. Yes. Then why aren't I moving? Kael laughed bitterly. Because you're stubborn. Because I'm not afraid of you, Rachel corrected. That made him turn around. His face was a mess of barely contained rage and something that looked dangerously close to grief. You should be, he said. Why? Because you kill people? Rachel stood up. I watched a woman burn my face while I was strapped to a table. You think you scare me more than that? Kael stared at her for a long moment. Then he crossed to the bar in the corner and poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey. He downed it in one swallow. My father, he said slowly, is the reason the circle exists. Rachel's stomach dropped. He didn't start it, Kael continued, but he funded it. 15 years ago, when my sister was diagnosed with leukemia, he became obsessed with finding a cure. Arnol blood was one of the experimental treatments, but it's so rare that legal channels couldn't supply enough. He poured another drink. So he went illegal, paid doctors to find donors, paid traffickers to acquire them, built an entire underground network to keep my sister alive. Rachel couldn't breathe. It didn't work, Kael said. She died anyway. And my father, his voice cracked. He couldn't accept it, so he kept the network running, told himself he was helping other families, saving lives. He turned my sister's death into a business. And you didn't know? Rachel whispered. Kael's laugh was hollow. I knew he was corrupt, knew he ran half the criminal enterprises in New York through shell companies. But I thought the blood trafficking was separate. I thought I'd destroyed it when I killed everyone connected to the circle 2 years ago. But your father survived. My father wasn't there, Kael said. He was in Seoul the whole time, pulling strings from across the ocean. I burned the operation to the ground, and he just rebuilt it. Used different names, different doctors, different locations. Rachel's hands clenched into fists. So when you said you failed, I meant I didn't go far enough. Kael set the glass down hard enough to crack it. I should have known he'd rebuild, should have tracked every dollar, every connection. Instead, I walked away and told myself I'd won. You did win, Rachel said. You saved people. Not you. The words hung in the air between them. Rachel walked over to where Kael stood and stopped directly in front of him. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into his face, the guilt eating him alive from the inside out. Listen to me, she said. What happened to me isn't your fault. Your father did this. Dr. Yoon did this, not you. I funded it, Kael said quietly. The detective who transported you? I paid him. The equipment in that facility? Probably bought with my money. I've been feeding the monster for 2 years without knowing it. Rachel grabbed his arm. Then stop feeling sorry for yourself and help me kill it. Kael looked down at her hand on his sleeve. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. You're not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? Someone broken. I am broken, Rachel said. But I'm still here, and I want blood just as much as you do. A slow, dangerous smile crossed Kael's face. Careful. You're starting to sound like me. Maybe that's not a bad thing. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Rachel couldn't name. Then Kael's phone buzzed, shattering it. He pulled it out and read the screen. His expression darkened. What? Rachel asked. Detective Nolan Graves just withdrew $50,000 from an offshore account, Kael said. The same account that paid for medical supplies to one of the buildings Min Jun flagged. Rachel's blood went cold. Graves. I know that name. Kael looked at her sharply. From where? The facility. I heard the guards talking about him. He's the one who brought in new girls. Rachel's voice shook. He's the one who brought me. Kael's jaw tightened. Where is he now? Leaving a bank in Midtown. Kael was already moving toward the door. Get your coat. Why? Because we're going to have a conversation with Detective Graves, Kael said. And you're going to watch. 20 minutes later, Rachel was sitting in the back of Kael's SUV as it weaved through Manhattan traffic. Jin was driving. Kael sat beside Rachel, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean to someone on the other end. Rachel's heart was pounding. She'd spent months running from confrontation, hiding from the people who'd hurt her. Now she was racing toward one of them. What are we going to do when we find him? She asked. Kael lowered the phone. I'm going to ask him questions. He's going to answer them. And if he doesn't, he will. The certainty in Kael's voice should have been comforting. Instead, it made Rachel's skin crawl. They found Graves outside a coffee shop on Lexington Avenue, checking his phone while he waited for his drink. He was in his late 40s, thick around the middle, with the kind of face that blended into crowds. He wore a cheap suit and scuffed shoes. He looked ordinary. That's what made it worse. Jin pulled the SUV up to the curb. Kael got out first, followed by Rachel. Graves glanced up as they approached, and Rachel saw the exact moment recognition hit him. His face went white. He turned and ran. Kael was faster. He caught Graves before he'd made it 10 feet, grabbed him by the collar, and slammed him against the side of a building. Pedestrians scattered. Someone screamed. Detective Graves, Kael said pleasantly, we need to talk. I don't know what you're talking about, Graves gasped. Really? Kael tightened his grip. Because you just pulled $50,000 from an account connected to a blood trafficking operation. That seems like something you'd remember. Graves's eyes darted toward Rachel. She saw the recognition there, saw him connect her face to the hundreds of girls he'd delivered to their deaths. I don't know her, Graves said. Rachel stepped closer. Yes, you do. I've never seen you before in my... You picked me up outside Mount Sinai Hospital on June 14th, Rachel said. Her voice was shaking but steady. You told me you were taking me in for questioning about a stolen prescription pad. You drove me to an alley in the Bronx and handed me over to 3 men in surgical masks. Graves's face twisted. You're lying. One of them had a tattoo on his wrist, a snake eating its own tail. You laughed when I asked where you were taking me. You said, somewhere you'll actually be useful. That Graves stopped struggling. I remember you, Rachel said quietly. Do you remember me? Kael's smile was vicious. Answer her. I want a lawyer, Graves said. You're not under arrest. Kael leaned in close. You're just having a bad day. You can't do this. I'm a cop. You're a trafficker, Kael said, and you're going to tell me everything about the Circle's current operation, starting with where the facility is located. I don't know what you're talking about, Kael sighed. Then he pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and held it up so Graves could see. It was a photo of Graves's daughter. School photo, maybe 12 years old, braces and a ponytail. Graves went rigid. Don't you fucking dare! Relax, Kael said. I don't hurt children, but I will make sure everyone in your precinct knows exactly what you've been doing. Your captain, your wife, your daughter's school. I'll destroy your life so completely that prison will feel like mercy. Graves was breathing hard. Sweat poured down his face. Or, Kael continued, you can tell me what I want to know, and I'll let you disappear. New identity, new city, a chance to be something other than a monster. For a long moment, Graves didn't speak. Then his shoulders slumped. There are 3 facilities, he said quietly. One in the Bronx, one in Queens, one in Newark. Locations, Kael said. Graves rattled off addresses. Minjun, who'd appeared from the SUV with a laptop, typed them all down. How many women? Kael asked. I don't know. 20? 30? They rotate them between sites. Who runs it? Graves hesitated. I asked you a question, Kael said. Dr. Yoon, Graves whispered. She's the one in charge. But she's got backing. Someone big. Someone with enough money to buy off half the NYPD. My father, Kael said flatly. Graves's eyes widened. I didn't know. Where's Yoon now? The Bronx facility. She's always there on Thursdays. Supervises the extractions personally. Kael released Graves and stepped back. The detective slumped against the wall, gasping for air. One more question, Kael said. Why did you do it? Graves laughed bitterly. You know what cops make in this city? I've got 2 kids in private school and a mortgage I can't pay. They offered me more money for one delivery than I make in 6 months. That's not a reason, Rachel said. Her voice was shaking with rage. That's an excuse. Graves looked at her. For a moment, something like shame flickered across his face. Yeah, he said. I guess it is. Kael nodded to Jin. Take him. Jin grabbed Graves and hauled him toward the SUV. The detective didn't resist. Rachel stood on the sidewalk, trembling. She'd just watched Kael extract a confession through threats and intimidation, and instead of being horrified, she felt satisfied. That scared her more than anything. You okay? Kael asked. Rachel shook her head. I wanted you to hurt him. I know. That's not who I am. It is now, Kael said, and that's not a bad thing. Anger keeps you alive. Or it turns me into someone like him. Kael studied her face. You'll never be like him, because Graves hurt people for money. You want to hurt people because they hurt you first. That's the difference. Rachel wasn't sure she believed him, but she didn't argue. They drove back to the penthouse with Graves locked in the trunk. Rachel sat in silence, watching the city blur past the windows. Somewhere out there, women were being drained in concrete rooms, just like she'd been, and now she knew exactly where to find them. When they arrived, Jin dragged Graves down to a sublevel Rachel didn't know existed. Kael led Rachel to his office and closed the door. We hit the Bronx facility tomorrow night, he said. Thursday, when Yoon is there. What about the others? Rachel asked. The women still inside? We get them out first, then we burn the place down. Rachel nodded. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear. I want to go with you, she said. No. I wasn't asking permission. Kael's expression hardened. You're not ready. I lived there for 6 months. I know the layout. I know the routines. You need me. What I need, Kael said, is for you to stay alive. If Yoon sees you. She's going to see me eventually, Rachel interrupted. Either tomorrow on your terms or next week when she finds me. I'd rather it be tomorrow. Kael was silent for a long moment. Then he walked to a cabinet in the corner and pulled out a handgun. He checked the magazine, then set it on the desk between them. You know how to use this? He asked. Rachel stared at the gun. No. Then you're not coming. Teach me. Kael raised an eyebrow. You want me to turn you into a killer? I want you to give me a chance to fight back, Rachel said. I'm tired of being a victim. Something shifted in Kael's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Okay, he said, but if I'm teaching you, we do it my way. No hesitation, no mercy. If you point a gun at someone, you pull the trigger. Rachel picked up the weapon. It was heavier than she'd expected, cold and solid in her palm. I can do that, she said. Kael smiled. We'll see. They spent the next 6 hours in a private shooting range beneath the building. Kael taught her how to load, aim, and fire with the same clinical efficiency he'd used to interrogate Graves. Rachel's hands blistered. Her ears rang despite the protective headphones. But by the time they finished, she could hit a target at 20 feet. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Tomorrow, Kael said as they rode the elevator back up, stays with you forever. Once you cross this line, you can't uncross it. I know, Rachel said. I'm serious. You kill someone even in self-defense. It changes you. I'm already changed, Rachel said quietly. They did that when they burned my face and drained my blood. All I'm doing now is deciding who I become next. Kael looked at her for a long moment. You're braver than my sister was. It was the first time he'd mentioned her without pain in his voice. She was 16, Rachel said. I'm 26. There's a difference. Not as much as you'd think. The elevator doors opened. They walked back into the penthouse to find Min-jun waiting with new information. Graves wasn't lying, Min-jun said. I cross-referenced the addresses with utility records. All 3 locations show unusual power consumption consistent with medical facilities. And I found something else. He pulled up a financial document on his laptop. Your father's company just transferred $5 million to an account in the Cayman Islands. The receiving account is registered to a shell corporation called Helix Biologics. Who owns it? Kael asked. Can't trace it. But Helix purchased lab equipment from a German supplier 3 months ago. Centrifuges, refrigeration units, IV pumps. Enough to outfit a small hospital. Kael's jaw tightened. He's expanding, or preparing to move, Min-jun said. If he knows you're looking, he knows, Kael said. He's known since the moment I pulled Rachel out of Grand Central. Rachel's blood went cold. How? Because my father has eyes everywhere, Kael said. And the moment I brought you here, I painted a target on both of us. As if on cue, every light in the penthouse went out. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the glow of the city through the windows. Rachel's heart slammed against her ribs. Don't move, Kael said quietly. Then the gunfire started. Glass exploded inward from the windows. Bullets tore through the walls. Rachel dropped to the floor, covering her head as debris rained down around her. She could hear shouting, Korean maybe, or just chaos. And then Kael's hand was on her arm, dragging her toward the hallway. Stay low, he ordered. They crawled through the darkness while the gunfire continued. Rachel's palms slid on broken glass. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. Somewhere behind them, she heard Jin returning fire, the sharp crack of his weapon cutting through the chaos. Kael pulled her into a side room and slammed the door. Emergency lighting kicked on, bathing everything in red. They were in a panic room. Steel walls, reinforced door, security monitors showing every angle of the penthouse. On the screens, Rachel could see armed men moving through the destroyed living room, sweeping with military precision. How many? She gasped. Kael was already at a weapons locker, pulling out rifles and ammunition. 8, maybe 10. Your father sent them. Of course he did. Rachel's hands were shaking so badly she could barely stand. What do we do? Kael handed her the handgun she'd trained with earlier. You stay here. The door's biometric. No one gets in without my fingerprint. Where are you going? To end this, Kael loaded a magazine into his rifle with practiced efficiency. If I don't come back, you... Don't, Rachel said. Don't say that. Kael looked at her. For the first time since they'd met, his expression was almost gentle. If I don't come back, he repeated, there's an escape tunnel behind that panel. It leads to a garage 2 blocks away. Keys are in the ignition. Take the car and drive until you hit Canada. I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice. He moved toward the door, but Rachel grabbed his arm. Wait, she said. Kael turned. Rachel didn't think. She just acted. She pulled him down and kissed him, hard, desperate, tasting like fear and fury and something she couldn't name. When she pulled back, Kael was staring at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Don't die, Rachel whispered. I'll do my best, Kael said. Then he was gone. Rachel collapsed against the wall, her heart racing, her lips still burning. On the security monitors, she watched Kael move through the penthouse like death itself. Silent, efficient, lethal. He fired 3 shots, and 3 men dropped. Jin appeared from another hallway, and they moved together, flanking the remaining attackers. But then Rachel saw something that made her blood freeze. On the monitor showing the main hallway, a woman in tactical gear was crouching beside the panic room door. She had something in her hand, a device, an explosive. Rachel's mind raced. Kael said the door was biometric, impenetrable, but he hadn't said anything about the walls. She watched the woman plant the charge and step back. Rachel had maybe 10 seconds. She looked around the panic room frantically. There, in the corner, a medical kit. The same kind they'd used in the facility. IV bags, tubing, needles. Rachel grabbed the kit and ripped it open. Her hands moved on instinct, muscle memory from years of medical training taking over. She found the largest bag, filled it with saline from the wall dispenser, and positioned herself against the far wall. The explosion ripped through the door like thunder. The shockwave threw Rachel backward. Her ears rang. Smoke filled the room. And then the woman in tactical gear was stepping through the destroyed doorway, gun raised. Rachel threw the saline bag. It hit the woman square in the face, bursting on impact. The woman stumbled, blinded, and Rachel didn't hesitate. She raised the handgun Kael had given her and fired. The recoil nearly broke her wrist. The shot went wide, hitting the wall. The woman recovered and aimed. Rachel fired again. This time, the bullet hit center mass. The woman dropped. Rachel stood there, shaking, the gun still raised, unable to process what she'd just done. Through the ringing in her ears, she could hear more gunfire. Shouting, chaos. Then Kael was there, appearing through the smoke, blood on his face and fury in his eyes. He saw the dead woman. He saw Rachel holding the gun. "I told you to stay inside," he said. "She was going to blow the door," Rachel said. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Kael grabbed her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" Rachel shook her head. "Did you check?" Kael demanded. She looked down. Her hands were covered in blood, but she didn't know whose. Her ears were still ringing. Her whole body was shaking. "I killed her," Rachel whispered. "I know," Kael said. "I shot her and she died." "I know." Rachel's legs gave out. Kael caught her before she hit the floor, the same way he had in Grand Central. But this time, Rachel wasn't collapsing from blood loss. She was collapsing from the weight of what she'd become. "I can't," she started. "Yes, you can," Kael said firmly. "Listen to me, Rachel. You did what you had to do. She came here to kill you. You defended yourself." "I'm a doctor," Rachel said. "I'm supposed to save lives." "You saved mine," Kael said. The words hit Rachel like a slap. She looked up at him through tears she didn't remember shedding. "If she'd gotten through that door while I was fighting," Kael continued, "I'd be dead. You stopped her. That's not murder. That's survival." Rachel wanted to believe him, wanted to accept the logic, but all she could see was the woman's face as the bullet hit, the way she'd crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. "Come on," Kael said gently. He pulled Rachel to her feet. "We need to move. There might be more." He led her through the destroyed penthouse. Bodies littered the floor, some Kael's work, some Jin's. The beautiful space Rachel had woken up in days ago was now a war zone. Jin met them in the main hallway, breathing hard, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "Building's secure," he said, "but NYPD is 3 minutes out. Someone called it in." "Graves?" Kael asked. "He's gone. Lockdown failed during the attack. He must have slipped out." Kael swore viciously in Korean. "We need to disappear," Jin said. "Now." Kael nodded. He turned to Rachel. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure it was true. They took the service elevator down to the garage. Kael's hands moved quickly, checking weapons, securing bags Rachel hadn't known existed. Within 5 minutes, they were in an unmarked sedan racing through Manhattan traffic. Rachel sat in the back seat, staring at her blood-stained hands. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "Somewhere they won't look," Kael said. "Your father knows everywhere you go." "Not everywhere." They drove north, out of the city, past the suburbs, into the dense forests of upstate New York. The sun was rising by the time they pulled off the highway onto a dirt road that barely qualified as navigable. At the end of the road was a gate. Kael pressed his thumb to a scanner and it swung open silently. "What is this place?" Rachel asked. "The Iron Vault," Kael said. "My family's final contingency." They drove another mile through the trees before the bunker came into view, a massive concrete structure built directly into the side of a mountain, camouflaged so well Rachel almost missed it. Kael parked and killed the engine. "We're safe here?" Rachel asked. Kael looked at her through the rear-view mirror. His face was exhausted, streaked with blood and soot. "For now," he said. They got out of the car. Jin immediately started unloading equipment. Rachel just stood there, looking at the bunker, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. She'd killed someone. She'd saved Kael's life. She'd crossed a line she could never uncross. "Rachel," Kael said quietly. She turned. "I'm sorry," he said. "I brought you into this. I put you in danger. If I'd known my father would move this fast—" "Stop," Rachel interrupted. "I chose to stay. I chose to fight. Don't take that away from me by apologizing." Kael studied her face. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Then we finish what we started." "How?" "Tomorrow night, the Bronx facility. We hit them before they hit us again." Rachel's jaw tightened. "And your father?" "He'll be there," Kael said. I know him. He won't trust Yoon to handle this alone. Not after tonight. Rachel's pulse quickened. So we end it. All of it. Tomorrow. Yes. She should have been terrified. Should have begged to run, to disappear, to take the car and drive to Canada like Kael had suggested. But all Rachel felt was rage. Cold. Crystalline. Absolute. Then let's go inside, she said. I want to be ready. Kael smiled. That same dangerous smile she'd seen in the penthouse. You already are, he said. They walked into the bunker together, and the steel door sealed shut behind them with a sound like a tomb closing. Tomorrow, they would either destroy the circle forever, or they would die trying. And Rachel realized, standing in the red emergency lighting of the bunker with a dead woman's blood still on her hands, that she was okay with either outcome. Because at least she'd die fighting, at least she'd die free. The iron vault smelled like recycled air and old concrete. Rachel stood in the main corridor, watching Jin unpack weapons from reinforced cases while Kael paced in front of a wall of security monitors. They'd been inside the bunker for 6 hours. No sunlight, no windows, just the hum of generators and the steady drip of condensation somewhere in the depths. Rachel's hands had stopped shaking an hour ago. The blood had been scrubbed from her skin, but she could still feel it there, phantom residue that wouldn't wash away no matter how hard she tried. She'd killed someone. The thought kept circling back, relentless. She'd pulled the trigger and ended a life. Medical school had taught her to save people, to fight death with everything she had. Now she was the thing doing the killing. You need to eat, Kael said without looking at her. Rachel glanced at the protein bar Jin had left on the table beside her. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. Why? So I have energy to kill more people tomorrow? That made Kael stop pacing. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. You did what you had to do, he said. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Rachel laughed bitterly. Is that what you tell yourself? Every time you pull the trigger, you just think, I had to do it and move on? Kael crossed the room and crouched in front of her so they were eye level. His face was close enough that Rachel could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the exhaustion in his dark eyes. No, he said quietly. I don't tell myself anything. I just live with it. How? Badly. Kael stood. But I'm still here. And so are you. That's what matters. He walked back to the monitors. Jin glanced at Rachel with something that might have been sympathy, then returned to checking ammunition counts. Rachel picked up the protein bar and forced herself to take a bite. It tasted like cardboard and regret. On the monitors, Rachel could see multiple camera feeds showing the exterior of the bunker. Trees, darkness, the dirt road they'd driven in on. Nothing moved except branches swaying in the wind. Your father doesn't know about this place? Rachel asked. He knows it exists, Kael said. He just doesn't know where. My grandfather built it during the Cold War, off the books. My father was in Seoul when it was constructed. So we're safe. We're hidden, Kael corrected. There's a difference. Min-jun emerged from a side corridor carrying a laptop. His glasses were smudged and his hands were shaking slightly. I got into Hanul Medical's server, he said. You need to see this. Kael moved to the laptop. Rachel stood and joined them, looking over Kael's shoulder at the screen. It was a shipping manifest. Dates, times, locations. Rachel's stomach turned as she read the entries. Medical equipment, blood storage units, IV supplies, all shipped to the 3 facilities Graves had identified, but there was a 4th location listed at the bottom. What's that? Rachel asked, pointing. Min-jun zoomed in. A private airfield in Teterboro. The shipment was marked priority transport and scheduled for tonight. They're moving the operation, Kael said quietly. Or evacuating, Jin added. After the attack on the penthouse, they know you're coming. Kael's jaw tightened. Can you track the plane's destination? Min-jun typed rapidly. Flight plan shows Seoul, but there's a fuel stop scheduled in. He stopped. Where? Kael demanded. Reykjavik, Iceland. Min-jun pulled up another document. And look at the passenger manifest. There were 3 names listed. Dr. Yoon Mi-rae, Min-jae Sung, and at the bottom, in smaller text, medical cargo. 12 units. Rachel's blood went cold. 12 units. 12 women. They're taking them out of the country, Kael said. His voice was deadly calm, which Rachel had learned meant he was furious. They're running. When does the plane leave? Jin asked. 3 hours, Min said. Kael checked his watch. We can make it to Teterboro in 90 minutes if we leave now. It's a trap, Jin said flatly. They know you'll come. They're probably counting on it. I don't care. You should. Jin stepped in front of Kael. Think. Your father abandons 3 facilities and consolidates everything at an airfield? He's baiting you. Then I'll bite. And get yourself killed. Kael's expression went cold. Move. Jin didn't budge. I've followed you into every war you've started. I watched you burn the circle down 2 years ago, and I didn't ask questions. But this, he gestured at the screen, this is suicide. I said move. No. Jin's voice was steady. You want to die fighting your father? Fine. But don't drag her into it. He nodded toward Rachel. Kael looked at Rachel. She met his gaze without flinching. I'm going, she said. Rachel, Jin started. I'm going, she repeated. Those 12 women? I was one of them. I know what they're going through right now. I know they're terrified and in pain and praying someone will save them. I'm not leaving them. Jin swore in Korean. Kael smiled grimly. Get the weapons. We leave in 10 minutes. They moved with military efficiency. Jin loaded rifles and ammunition into the car. Min stayed behind to monitor communications and track the flight. Rachel changed into dark clothing Jin had pulled from storage, tactical pants, a black shirt, boots that actually fit. She looked at herself in the small bathroom mirror. The burn mark on her cheek stood out starkly against her pale skin. The scar on her face had faded slightly, but would never disappear. She looked like a survivor, or a soldier. Rachel wasn't sure there was a difference anymore. When she emerged, Kael was strapping a knife to his ankle. He glanced up, and his expression shifted, something between approval and concern. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I do. Why? Rachel thought about the concrete room, the needles, the voice on the intercom telling her to stay still, the months of terror and pain and helplessness. Because I'm tired of being afraid, she said. Kael held her gaze for a long moment. Then he handed her a handgun, the same model she'd trained with. Stay close to me, he said. If shooting starts, you get behind cover and you stay there. Understand? Rachel nodded. They drove south through the darkness, the car's headlights cutting through heavy fog. Jin drove with the same lethal efficiency he did everything else. Kael sat in the passenger seat, checking his phone every few minutes. Rachel sat in the back, the gun heavy in her lap, and tried not to think about what was waiting for them at the airfield. Min just sent an update, Kael said. Private security at Teterboro reported unusual activity near Hangar 7. Multiple vehicles, armed personnel. How many? Jin asked. At least 15. Jin whistled low. We're outnumbered 5-1. We've had worse odds. Name one time. Kael was quiet for a moment. The warehouse in Red Hook. We almost died in Red Hook, but we didn't. Jin shook his head but didn't argue further. They arrived at Teterboro just after midnight. Jin parked the car in the shadows near the perimeter fence, far from the main terminal. Through the chain link, Rachel could see Hangar 7 in the distance, a massive structure lit by floodlights surrounded by black SUVs. Kael pulled out binoculars and scanned the area. 2 guards at the main entrance, he said. 4 more patrolling the perimeter. I don't see the plane yet. It's inside the hangar, Jin said. They're loading it out of sight. Kael lowered the binoculars. We go in through the service entrance on the east side, quiet. No shooting unless we have no choice. And when we do have no choice? Rachel asked. Kael looked at her. Then we make it count. They cut through the fence with bolt cutters Jin produced from the trunk. The metal parted with a soft whisper. One by one, they slipped through and moved across the tarmac, staying low, using parked aircraft as cover. The night was cold and quiet, except for the distant sound of jet engines warming up. Rachel's heart pounded so hard she thought it might give them away. They reached the service entrance without incident. Kael tried the door, locked. Jin pulled out a small toolkit and went to work on the mechanism while Kael and Rachel kept watch. 30 seconds later, the lock clicked open. They slipped inside. The interior of the hangar was cavernous. A private jet sat in the center, its engines idling, stairs extended. Men in tactical gear moved around it, loading crates marked with medical symbols. Rachel counted at least a dozen armed guards. And there, standing near the plane's entrance, was Dr. Yoon. Rachel's breath caught. Even from a distance, she recognized the woman who'd branded her face, who'd decided which girls lived and which ones disappeared. Yoon was speaking into a phone, her expression cold and focused. "There," Jin whispered, pointing to a stack of crates near the far wall. "Medical transport containers. The women are probably in those." Rachel's stomach turned. They were shipping human beings like cargo. Kael scanned the hangar, calculating angles and cover points. "Jin, you take the left flank. Create a distraction. Rachel and I will move for the containers while they're focused on you." "What kind of distraction?" Jin asked. "The loud kind." Jin grinned without humor. "My specialty." They split up. Jin disappeared into the shadows on the left side of the hangar. Kael and Rachel moved right, staying behind equipment and storage units, inching closer to the medical containers. Rachel could see them now. 12 units, each roughly the size of a coffin, with small ventilation holes and biohazard labels. Her skin crawled. She'd been transported in something similar during her escape attempt months ago. They were 20 feet away when the shooting started. Jin opened fire from the far side of the hangar, his rifle cracking like thunder in the enclosed space. Guards scattered, shouting, returning fire. The careful loading operation dissolved into chaos.
"Oh, now,"
Kael hissed. They ran for the containers. Kael reached the first one and yanked open the latch. Inside, barely conscious, was a young woman with IV lines still in her arms. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "We're getting you out," Kael said quickly. He lifted her out and set her on the ground. "Can you walk?" The woman nodded weakly. Rachel moved to the next container and opened it. Another woman, this one younger, maybe 19. She was crying silently, too weak to make sound. "It's okay," Rachel said, her voice shaking. "We're here to help." She helped the woman out and moved to the third container. That's when she heard the voice behind her. "Well, this is disappointing." Rachel froze. She turned slowly. Dr. Yoon stood 15 feet away, flanked by 4 armed men. In her hand was a small remote device. She pressed a button and instantly the gunfire stopped. Jin's voice echoed across the hangar. "Kael!" Rachel looked toward where Jin had been firing from. He was on his knees, surrounded by guards, a gun pressed to his head. "Drop your weapons," Yoon said calmly, "or I'll have them execute him." Kael's jaw clenched. Slowly, he set his rifle on the ground. Rachel did the same with her handgun. Yoon smiled. "Much better." More guards emerged from the shadows, surrounding them completely. Rachel's mind raced, searching for an exit, but there was none. They were trapped. "I have to admit," Yoon said, walking closer, "I'm impressed you made it this far. Most people who escape the circle don't survive a week. You lasted 2 months." She stopped in front of Rachel. "You're resilient. That's what made you so valuable." Rachel's hands clenched into fists. "Where are the others? The women from the Bronx facility?" "Safe," Yoon said. "They're assets. We don't waste assets. You drain them until they die." "We harvest them until they're no longer viable," Yoon corrected. "There's a difference." Kael moved slightly, drawing Yoon's attention. "Kael Min," Yoon said. "The prodigal son returns. Your father will be so pleased." "Where is he?" Kael asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. Yoon gestured toward the plane. "Waiting for you." 2 guards grabbed Kael and hauled him toward the aircraft. More grabbed Rachel and Jin. They were dragged up the stairs and into the plane's interior. The cabin had been modified. The luxury seating was gone, replaced by medical equipment and storage units. And at the far end, in a wheelchair connected to oxygen tanks, sat an old man who looked like he was already halfway to the grave. Min Jae-sung, Kael's father. He was skeletal, his skin the color of old paper, his eyes sunken. But when he looked at Kael, those eyes burned with something vicious and alive. "My son," he said in Korean. His voice was a rasp. "You've come home." Kael said nothing. The chairman smiled. "Nothing to say? No angry speeches? I'm disappointed." "I should have killed you 2 years ago," Kael said quietly. Yes, the chairman agreed. You should have. But you were always too sentimental, too soft, just like your mother. Don't talk about her. Why not? She's the reason you're so weak, the reason you couldn't save your sister. The chairman's smile widened. Do you know what your sister's last words were? Kael lunged forward. Guards immediately restrained him, slamming him against the cabin wall. The chairman laughed, a wet, rattling sound. She asked for you, he continued, called your name. But you weren't there, were you? You were too busy playing gangster in New York while she died in a hospital bed in Seoul. Shut up, Kael said. I tried to save her, spent millions, built an entire network, but her blood was too rare. RH null. 1 in 6 million. The chairman's eyes moved to Rachel. Until I found others. Rachel's blood went cold. Your sister didn't have RH null blood, she said slowly. The chairman smiled. No, she didn't. The world tilted. Then why? Rachel started. Because I do, the chairman said. I've had leukemia for 15 years. Your sister's death was unfortunate, but it taught me a valuable lesson. If I wanted to survive, I needed a reliable supply of compatible blood. Kael had gone very still. You lied. I adapted, the chairman corrected. Your sister was sick, yes, but her death was merely an opportunity, a way to fund my real treatment. You built the circle for yourself, Kael said. His voice was hollow. Of course. The chairman gestured weakly at the medical equipment surrounding him. Every woman you've tried to save, they were keeping me alive. Every facility you destroyed, you were destroying my lifeline. Rachel felt bile rise in her throat. You're a monster. I'm a survivor, the chairman said. The same as you, Miss Vale. We do what we must to live. I never hurt anyone, not until tonight. The chairman's smile was knowing. Dr. Yoon showed me the security footage from Kael's penthouse. You killed one of my people, shot her in the chest without hesitation. So tell me, how are you different from me? Rachel couldn't answer, because he was right. She'd pulled the trigger. She'd ended a life. The justification didn't change the fact. Here's what's going to happen, the chairman said. You're going to give me your blood, all of it if necessary, and Kael is going to watch. No, Kael said. Yes. The chairman nodded to Yoon. Strap her in. Guards dragged Rachel toward a medical chair in the center of the cabin, the same kind of chair she'd been imprisoned in for 6 months. She fought, kicking and twisting, but they were too strong. They forced her down and locked the restraints around her wrists and ankles. Don't do this, Kael said. His voice was raw. Take me instead. My blood. Leave her alone. The chairman laughed. Your blood is worthless to me. We're related. Transfusing from you would kill me faster than the cancer. Then kill me, Kael said desperately. Just let her go. Why would I do that? The chairman watched as Yoon prepared the IV equipment. She's the most valuable asset in this entire operation. RH null. Perfect compatibility. She could keep me alive for years. Rachel's chest tightened with panic. The restraints bit into her wrists. She could feel the familiar terror rising, the same helplessness she'd felt in the facility. Yoon approached with a needle. Rachel's breathing turned shallow and rapid. Wait, Kael said. Father, please, I'll do anything. I'll disappear. I'll give you the empire. Just let her go. The chairman studied his son with something like pity. You still don't understand, he said. I don't want your empire. I don't want your obedience. I want you to suffer the way I suffered watching your sister die. I want you to know what it feels like to lose someone while being completely powerless to stop it. Kael's face went white. Consider this a lesson, the chairman continued. In what happens when you oppose me? Yoon inserted the needle into Rachel's arm. Rachel gasped at the familiar sting, the cold rush of the IV line opening. No, Kael said. He struggled against the guards holding him. No, you can't. I already have, the chairman said. Rachel watched her blood flow through the clear tubing into the collection bag. Her vision started to blur at the edges. She could hear Kael shouting, could hear the chairman laughing, but it all seemed very far away. She'd been so close to freedom, so close to ending this nightmare. Now she was right back where she started. Jin's voice cut through the haze. Kael, listen to me. Kael was still fighting the guards, wild and desperate. Jin was on his knees nearby, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "You need to calm down," Jin said urgently. "You need to think." "They're killing her," Kael said. "Not yet," Jin said. "They're draining her, slowly, which means we have time." "Time for what?" Jin's eyes moved to something behind the chairman. Rachel followed his gaze and saw it, a fire suppression panel on the cabin wall, the kind that would flood the entire plane with halon gas if triggered. "Trust me," Jin said quietly. Kael's eyes widened slightly. Then he went still, stopped fighting. The guards relaxed their grip slightly, thinking he'd given up. That's when Jin moved. He drove his elbow backward into the gut of the guard behind him. The man doubled over and Jin grabbed his weapon, swung it around, and fired 3 shots directly into the fire suppression panel. The panel exploded in sparks. Alarms shrieked, red emergency lights flooded the cabin, and then white gas began pouring from vents in the ceiling, thick and choking. People started shouting. The guards released Kael to cover their faces. Yoon stumbled backward from Rachel's chair, temporarily blinded. Kael didn't hesitate. He grabbed the nearest guard's rifle and swung it like a club, dropping 2 men in seconds. Jin was already moving, firing with brutal precision, clearing a path to Rachel. But the halon gas was filling the cabin faster than expected. Rachel's lungs burned. She couldn't breathe, couldn't see. Then Kael was there, ripping the IV from her arm and tearing at the restraints. "Stay with me," he said. His voice was muffled by the gas but fierce. "Rachel, stay with me." The restraints came free. Kael lifted her and ran for the exit, Jin covering them from behind. They burst out of the plane and onto the stairs. Fresh air hit Rachel's face like a slap. She gasped and coughed, her lungs screaming. Behind them, the cabin was pure chaos. Guards stumbled out choking. Yoon appeared at the door, her face twisted with rage. She raised a gun. Jin shot her before she could fire. Yoon fell backward into the smoke. "Move," Jin shouted. "The whole hangar's going to—" The explosion cut him off. Something inside the plane ignited. Maybe the oxygen tanks, maybe fuel, and the entire aircraft erupted in flames. The shockwave threw them off the stairs. Rachel hit the ground hard, Kael landing on top of her, shielding her from the debris raining down around them. For a long moment, Rachel couldn't hear anything except ringing. Couldn't see anything except orange flames and black smoke. Then Kael was pulling her to her feet, and they were running through the burning hangar while the ceiling began to collapse. They made it outside just as the roof caved in behind them. The heat was intense enough to sear Rachel's back through her shirt. She ran until her legs gave out, then collapsed on the tarmac 50 yards from the inferno. Kael fell beside her, coughing violently. Jin appeared a moment later, his face covered in soot and blood. "Is he dead?" Kael gasped. "My father, is he—" Jin pointed back at the hangar. Through the flames, Rachel could see the twisted wreckage of the plane. Nothing inside could have survived that heat. "He's dead," Jin said. Kael closed his eyes. His hands were shaking. Rachel sat up slowly, her head spinning. Her arm throbbed where the IV had been. But she was alive. She was free. Then she remembered. "The women," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "The containers. They were still in the hangar." Jin's expression went grim. "I know. We have to—" "Rachel." Jin gripped her shoulder. "We can't. The building's gone." Rachel looked at the flames consuming everything. 12 women. 12 lives she'd been so close to saving. All dead because they'd been seconds too late. "No," Rachel whispered. "No, we were supposed to save them. That's why we came here. That was the point." "The point was surviving," Kael said quietly. He was staring at the fire with hollow eyes. "And we did." "They didn't." Kael flinched like she'd slapped him. Sirens wailed in the distance. Fire trucks. Police. They had maybe 2 minutes before the entire area was swarmed with authorities. "We need to move," Jin said. "Now!" They dragged themselves to their feet. Rachel's legs felt like they were made of paper. Kael had to support her as they stumbled back toward the perimeter fence. Behind them, the hangar burned like a funeral pyre. They made it back to the car and Jin drove them away from Teterboro at just under the speed limit. Fast enough to escape. Slow enough not to draw attention. Rachel sat in the back seat, numb, watching the orange glow fade in the rearview mirror. She'd killed someone tonight. watched 12 others die, failed to save the very people she'd promised herself she'd rescue. And for what? "Where are we going?" she asked. Her voice sounded dead even to her own ears. "Back to the vault," Kael said. "We need to regroup. Figure out what's left." "What's left?" Rachel laughed bitterly. "Your father's dead. Yoon's dead. The circle is destroyed. Isn't that what you wanted?" "Not like this." "Then how?" Kael turned to look at her. His face was streaked with soot and blood and exhaustion. "I wanted you to be safe," he said quietly. Rachel looked away. "I don't think I'll ever be safe again." They drove in silence for the next hour. Dawn was breaking by the time they reached the vault. The rising sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, beautiful and terrible, and completely indifferent to everything that had happened in the darkness. Min-jun met them at the entrance, his face pale. "I saw the news," he said. "The explosion. I thought—" "We're alive," Jin said shortly. "Barely." They went inside. Rachel walked straight to the small room she'd slept in before and collapsed on the bed fully clothed. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just lay there staring at the ceiling while her mind replayed the night over and over. The women in the containers, the flames, the screaming. A knock at the door made her turn her head. Kael stood in the doorway. He looked as destroyed as she felt. "Can I come in?" he asked. Rachel nodded. Kael sat on the edge of the bed. For a long time, neither of them spoke. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "For what?" "All of it. For dragging you into this war, for making you into—" He stopped. "Into what?" Rachel asked. "A killer? Someone who watches people burn? Someone who fails?" "Someone like me," Kael said quietly. Rachel sat up. "I'm nothing like you. You killed someone last night. You chose violence. You crossed the line. To save your life. And I'd do the same for you," Kael said. He looked at her. "I already did. When I carried you out of that plane. When I chose you over finishing my father myself. That's what you've become, Rachel. Someone worth saving." Rachel's throat tightened. 12 women died because of me. Because I wanted revenge. Because I couldn't let it go. 12 women died because my father was a monster, Kael said firmly. Not because of you. "How do you live with it?" Rachel whispered. "All the death? All the failure?" Kael was quiet for a long moment. "I don't," he finally said. "I just keep moving forward. Because if I stop, if I let myself think about everyone I couldn't save," his voice cracked, "I'd never move again." He stood and walked to the door. "Kael," Rachel said. He turned. "Thank you," she said, "for not letting me die tonight." Kael's expression softened. "Thank you for not letting me." He left, closing the door behind him. Rachel lay back down and closed her eyes. Sleep didn't come. Instead, she saw flames, heard screaming, felt the weight of 12 deaths pressing down on her chest until she couldn't breathe. She'd crossed the line Kael warned her about, and now she had to learn to live on the other side of it. Somewhere in the vault, she could hear Kael and Jin talking in low voices, planning, strategizing, preparing for whatever came next. Because even though the chairman was dead, even though Yoon was gone, the circle had been bigger than two people. There were still facilities operating, still women being drained, still buyers waiting for their shipments. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. And Rachel realized, lying in the darkness of the bunker, that she couldn't walk away now even if she wanted to. She'd become part of this, part of Kael's crusade, part of the violence. She'd stopped being prey the moment she pulled the trigger. Now she was the hunter. And there was no going back. Rachel didn't sleep. She lay in the darkness of the bunker listening to the muffled sounds of Kael and Jin arguing in Korean, their voices rising and falling like waves. The words were incomprehensible, but the tone was clear. They were fracturing. Around 4 in the morning, she gave up trying to rest. She walked into the main corridor and found Min-jun hunched over his laptop, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. He looked up when she approached. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. Rachel shook her head. "What are you working on?" Min-jun hesitated, then turned the laptop so she could see. It was a financial document, bank transfers, wire receipts. transaction histories. I've been tracking the money, he said quietly, following every payment that went through Hanoel Medical in the last 6 months. And? And your father wasn't the only one funding the circle. Min-jun pulled up another screen. There are 3 other investors, shell corporations, offshore accounts. But the money is real, millions of dollars. Rachel's stomach turned. How many facilities are we talking about?
At least 7, maybe more.
Min-jun's hands shook slightly as he typed. The Bronx, Queens, Newark, those were just the visible operations. There are others in Baltimore, Philadelphia, Boston. The network is bigger than Kael thought. Does he know? Not yet. I've been trying to... Min-jun stopped as footsteps echoed down the corridor. Kael appeared, his face drawn and exhausted. He looked at the laptop screen, then at Min-jun. Tell me, he said. Min-jun explained everything he'd found. With each new detail, Kael's expression grew darker. When Min-jun finished, Kael was silent for a long moment. 7 facilities, he finally said. How many women? Based on supply orders and medical equipment purchases? At least 80, maybe 100. The number hit Rachel like a physical blow. 100 women, 100 people suffering the same nightmare she'd escaped. We can't save them all, Jin said from the doorway. He'd been listening. Not with 3 people and whatever weapons we have left. Then we get more people, Kael said. Who? Every crew we trust is already committed elsewhere. And after the explosion at Teterboro, every law enforcement agency in the tri-state area is looking for us. I don't care. You should. Jin walked into the room. We're not an army, Kael. We're 3 men and a woman who should be in a hospital, not planning a war. Kael's eyes flashed. Then leave. I'm not asking you to... I'm not leaving, Jin snapped. I'm trying to keep you alive long enough to actually win this. The 2 men stared at each other, the tension thick enough to choke on. Rachel stepped between them. Stop, both of you. They both looked at her. Jin's right, Rachel said. We can't hit 7 facilities at once. We don't have the numbers. We don't have the resources. So what do you suggest? Kael asked. Rachel looked at the laptop screen, her mind racing. Then something clicked. We don't need to hit all of them, she said slowly. We just need to make them think we are. Kael's expression shifted. Explain. Your father is dead. Yoon is dead. The circle's leadership is gone. Rachel pointed at the financial documents. But the money is still flowing, which means someone else is running it now. Someone who's probably terrified you're coming for them next. So we use that fear, Jin said, catching on. We make them panic, Rachel continued. We hit one facility, make it loud, make it visible. And when they scramble to protect the others, we take them all down at once, Kael finished. His eyes were sharp now, focused. Create chaos. Force them to reveal themselves. Min-jun pulled up a map showing all 7 facilities. Which one do we hit? Rachel studied the locations. Her finger moved to one marker in the Bronx, the same neighborhood where she'd been held. There, she said. That's where it started for me. That's where it ends. Kael looked at her. Are you sure? Rachel thought about the concrete room, the voice on the intercom, the months of terror. Then she thought about the 12 women who'd burned at Teterboro, the ones she couldn't save. I'm sure, she said. They spent the next 18 hours planning. Min-jun hacked into the facility's security system and pulled blueprints. Jin inventoried their weapons and ammunition. Kael made calls to contacts Rachel didn't know he had, people who owed him favors, people who were willing to look the other way. Rachel did something she hadn't done in months. She studied medical textbooks, trauma protocols, emergency procedures. If they were going to extract women from that facility, someone needed to know how to keep them alive afterward. And the only person with medical training was her. You don't have to do this, Kael said, appearing in the doorway of the small room she'd converted into a makeshift study. Rachel looked up from a page on hypovolemic shock. Yes, I do. Why? Because I'm a doctor. The words felt strange in her mouth. She hadn't called herself that since her abduction. Or I was. Or I will be again. I don't know. But those women, they're going to need someone who understands what's been done to them. Someone who knows how to reverse it. Kael sat down across from her. You're not responsible for saving everyone. Neither are you, Rachel said. But you're still trying. That's different. Why? Because you're the big bad mafia king and I'm just the victim you picked up off the floor? Kael flinched. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He was quiet for a long moment. I meant that I've been doing this for years. I've built up scar tissue. You're still bleeding. Rachel closed the textbook. Maybe I need to bleed. Maybe that's the only way I heal. Kael studied her face. When did you get so ruthless? When I stopped being afraid of becoming you. Something shifted in Kael's expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. He reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused. After tomorrow, he said quietly, if we survive, what do you want? Rachel hadn't let herself think that far ahead, hadn't allowed herself to imagine a future beyond the next 24 hours. I want to finish medical school, she said slowly. I want to open a clinic, help people who've been through what I went through. That's good, Kael said. That's good. What about you? Kael laughed bitterly. I don't know if there's an after for me. This is all I know, violence, revenge, burning things down. You could learn something else. Like what? Like how to build something instead of destroying it. Kael looked at their joined hands. I don't know if I'm capable of that. You saved me, Rachel said. That's building something. His grip tightened. Rachel. Whatever he was about to say was cut off by Jin's voice over the intercom. We've got a problem. They found Jin in the main security room, staring at multiple monitors showing news feeds. On every screen, the same headline scrolled past. Massive explosion at private airfield. 3 dead. Authorities investigating possible terrorism. 3 dead? Rachel asked. There were at least 20 people in that hangar. Official count, Jin said grimly. Which means someone's covering it up. Someone with enough power to control the narrative. Minjun pulled up another screen. I've been monitoring police scanners. There's been radio silence about Teterboro for the last 6 hours. No witness interviews, no evidence collection, nothing. They're protecting the operation, Kael said. Even with my father dead, someone high up is making sure the circle stays buried. Who has that kind of reach? Rachel asked. Kael's jaw tightened. I can think of one person. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. After 3 rings, a woman's voice answered. Kael, I was wondering when you'd call. Kael put the phone on speaker. Senator Han, we need to talk. Do we? The woman's voice was cultured, controlled. Because from where I'm sitting, you just bombed a private airfield and killed 3 people. That's not something we talk about. Your investment in Hanol Medical suggests otherwise, Kael said coldly. There was a pause. I don't know what you're talking about. Shell Corporation registered in Delaware. $15 million transferred over the last 2 years. All of it funding blood trafficking operations across the eastern seaboard. Kael's voice was lethal. Should I keep going? Another pause, longer this time. What do you want? Senator Han asked. I want the locations of every facility still operating. I want the names of everyone involved, and I want you to shut down the coverage of Teterboro. That's asking a lot. You owe me, Kael said. I kept your name out of the Red Hook investigation 3 years ago. I'd hate to revisit that decision. Rachel heard the senator breathing on the other end of the line. Fine, she finally said, but this clears the debt. After this, we're done. We're done when I say we're done. The facilities are in Baltimore, Philadelphia, Boston, Newark, Queens, the Bronx, and one I just approved last week in Providence. I'll send you the addresses. And the people running them? Dr. Marcus Chen in Baltimore, Dr. Sarah Okonkwo in Philadelphia. The others rotate between sites, but the person coordinating everything now, she hesitated. You're not going to like this. Tell me, Detective Graves, he didn't die in your penthouse attack. He's been consolidating power since your father's death, positioning himself as the new middleman. Kael's expression turned murderous. Where is he? The Bronx facility. He's been there for the last 12 hours trying to move the women before you find them. Kael ended the call and looked at Jin. How fast can we move? 2 hours if we leave now, Jin said. But Kael, if Graves knows we're coming, he doesn't. He thinks I'm still looking for my father's body in the wreckage. Kael turned to Min-jun. Get me blueprints of that facility. Every entrance, every exit, every ventilation shaft. I want to know that building better than the people inside it. Min-jun's fingers flew across the keyboard. On it. Kael looked at Rachel. This is your last chance to walk away. Rachel stood. I'm not walking anywhere. I'm finishing this. 30 minutes later, they were armed and moving. Jin drove while Kael sat in the passenger seat reviewing the blueprints Min-jun had pulled. Rachel sat in the back, checking the medical supplies they'd packed. IV kits, antibiotics, emergency transfusion equipment. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. She'd expected to be terrified, to feel the same paralyzing fear she'd felt in the facility months ago. Instead, she felt calm, focused, ready. The building used to be a textile factory, Kael said, studying the blueprints. 3 floors. The medical operations are in the basement. Ground floor is abandoned. Second floor is administrative offices. That's probably where Graves is set up. How many guards? Jin asked. Unknown, but if he's consolidating power, he'll have brought in reinforcements. Rachel leaned forward. What about the women? Where are they keeping them? Kael pointed to a section of the basement. Here, former storage area. Concrete walls, 1 entrance. That's a death trap, Jin said. If shooting starts down there, then we make sure it doesn't, Kael interrupted. Rachel and I go in through the basement. We get the women out first. Jin, you create a distraction on the 2nd floor. Pull Graves and his men away from the basement. And if that doesn't work? Rachel asked. Kael looked at her. Then we improvise. They arrived at the facility just after midnight. The building loomed against the night sky, dark and abandoned looking. But Rachel could see the signs of occupation, fresh tire tracks in the gravel, new locks on the doors, security cameras mounted at the corners. Jin parked 2 blocks away. They geared up in silence, weapons, ammunition, radios. Rachel strapped a knife to her thigh and tucked the handgun into her waistband. It felt heavier than it had at the shooting range. Remember, Kael said, we're not here to fight. We're here to extract. Get in, get the women, get out. And if Graves tries to stop us? Jin asked. Kael's smile was cold. Then we make sure he can't. They approached the building from 3 different angles. Jin went in through the front entrance. Kael and Rachel circled to the back where an old service door hung slightly ajar. Kael tested the door. It opened silently, revealing a dark stairwell leading down. Stay close, he whispered. They descended into the basement. The smell hit Rachel first, antiseptic and blood and fear, the same combination she remembered from her captivity. Her stomach turned, but she forced herself to keep moving. The stairwell opened into a long corridor. Flickering fluorescent lights cast everything in sickly green. Rachel could hear voices ahead, guards talking, footsteps echoing. Kael held up 2 fingers. 2 guards. He gestured for Rachel to stay back, then moved forward with lethal silence. Rachel watched him work. It was over in seconds. 2 quick strikes, 2 bodies dropping to the floor without a sound. Kael dragged them into a side room and returned, his expression blank. Clear, he said quietly. They moved deeper into the basement. Rachel's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Every corner they turned, she expected to see armed men, expected to hear gunfire. Instead, they found the storage area. The door was steel, reinforced, with a biometric lock. Kael pulled out a small device Min-jun had given him and attached it to the scanner. It beeped twice, then the lock clicked open. Kael pulled the door open slowly. Inside were 14 women. They were in various states of consciousness, some strapped to medical chairs, others lying on cots with IV lines in their arms. The ones who were awake stared at Rachel and Kael with hollow, terrified eyes. Rachel's breath caught. She recognized some of their faces from missing persons reports she'd seen in Kael's penthouse. These weren't just victims. They were daughters, sisters, mothers, people who'd been erased from the world. We're getting you out, Rachel said quietly. She moved to the nearest woman and started removing the IV. All of you, can you walk? The woman nodded weakly. Rachel worked quickly, disconnecting IVs, unbuckling restraints, helping women to their feet. Kael stood guard at the door, his weapon raised, watching the corridor. They were almost done when Rachel heard it. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Moving fast. Kael, she said. He heard it too. How many can walk? Rachel looked at the women. 6 were on their feet, shaky but mobile. 8 were still too weak, unconscious or barely responsive. 6, Rachel said.
Then we move them first. Come back for the others.
We can't leave them.
We don't have a choice, Kael said. His voice was hard, but his eyes were desperate. If we try to move everyone at once, we'll all die. Rachel's hands clenched into fists. He was right. She hated it, but he was right.
Okay, she said. 6 first. They guided the mobile women toward the door. Kael went first, clearing the corridor. Rachel followed with the group, moving as quickly as their weakened states allowed. They'd made it maybe 20 feet when the lights went out. Darkness dropped like a hammer. Rachel froze, her hand on the shoulder of the woman in front of her. Then Kael's voice came through the darkness, calm and controlled. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Rachel held her breath. She could hear movement somewhere ahead, boots on concrete, weapons being readied. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, then another, then 6 more. They were surrounded.
Well, well, a familiar voice said, Gus. Kael Min, I was hoping you'd show up.
Detective Graves stepped into the light. He looked different than he had in Midtown, harder, more confident. He was flanked by armed men, at least a dozen of them, all pointing weapons at Kael's group.
Graves, Kael said. His voice was deadly calm. You're supposed to be dead. Funny. I was thinking the same about you. Graves gestured with his gun. Drop your weapons. All of them. Kael didn't move. You're outnumbered. Am I? Graves smiled. Because from where I'm standing, I've got 12 guns pointed at you and 6 terrified women who can barely stand. Seems like I'm doing fine.
Rachel's mind raced. They were trapped. The corridor behind them led back to the storage room, a dead end. The corridor ahead was blocked by Graves and his men. Let the women go, Kael said. Your fight is with me. My fight is with anyone who threatens my operation, Graves said. And right now, that's you. He looked at Rachel. And her, the one who got away. Rachel met his eyes without flinching. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. Graves raised his gun and aimed it directly at her face. You cost me a lot of money. The chairman paid me $50,000 for your delivery. Then you escaped and I had to refund him. That's not how I do business. Your business is slavery, Rachel said. And it's over. Graves laughed. Over? Sweetheart, we're just getting started. With the chairman dead and Yoon gone, there's a power vacuum. Someone needs to fill it. Might as well be me. Not happening, Kael said. No? Graves gestured to his men. Kill him. Everything happened at once. Kael dove sideways, pulling Rachel with him. Gunfire erupted, deafening in the enclosed space. Rachel hit the ground hard, her ears ringing. Then Jin's voice crackled through the radio. Distraction incoming. An explosion rocked the building from above. The lights flickered back on, then off again. Graves's men stumbled, momentarily disoriented. Kael moved like lightning. He fired 3 shots. 3 men dropped. Rachel scrambled backward, pushing the women behind her, trying to shield them with her body. More gunfire. The corridor filled with smoke and noise. Rachel couldn't see Kael anymore. Couldn't see anything except muzzle flashes and shadows. Then someone grabbed her arm. She spun, raising her gun, and found herself face to face with one of the women she'd freed, a girl maybe 20 years old with terrified eyes. Help me, the girls whispered. Rachel looked past her and saw Graves moving through the smoke, his gun raised, searching for Kael. Rachel made a decision. She stood, aimed, and fired. The shot went wide, hitting the wall beside Graves's head, but it got his attention. He spun toward her, his face twisted with rage. Big mistake, he said. He aimed. Rachel closed her eyes. The shot never came. She opened her eyes to see Graves stumbling forward, blood spreading across his chest. Behind him, Kael stood with his weapon raised, his expression murderous. Graves fell to his knees, then collapsed face first onto the concrete. The gunfire stopped. Rachel's ears rang in the sudden silence. She looked around frantically. 3 of Graves's men were dead. The others had fled. The 6 women they'd rescued were huddled against the wall, alive but traumatized. Rachel, Kael said. She turned. Kael was bleeding from a wound in his shoulder, but his eyes were focused on her. Are you hurt? He asked. Rachel shook her head. The others, we need to go back for the others. Jin's already... Another explosion from above cut him off. This one was bigger, closer. The ceiling cracked. Dust and debris rained down. We need to move, Kael said. Now. The building's not stable. But the women... Jin has them. He's bringing them up through the north stairwell. We meet him at the extraction point. Rachel wanted to argue, wanted to go back herself, make sure every single person made it out. But Kael was right. If they stayed, they'd all die. She helped the 6 women to their feet and they ran. The building groaned around them, steel beams bending, concrete crumbling. Rachel's lungs burned. Her legs screamed in protest. But she kept moving, kept pushing forward. They burst out of the basement and into the ground floor. Through the broken windows, Rachel could see Jin's van pulling up outside. Go, Kael shouted. Get them in the van. Rachel guided the women outside. Jin was already there, helping another group, 8 more women, the ones from the storage room. He'd gotten them out. Everyone in, Jin ordered. The women climbed into the van. Rachel counted them frantically. 14. All of them accounted for. She turned to go back for Kael. That's when the gunshot rang out. Rachel spun around. Through the smoke pouring from the building's entrance, she saw Kael stumble backward. Blood bloomed across his chest. Too much blood, spreading too fast. He fell to his knees, and Detective Graves emerged from the smoke behind him, gun raised, bleeding, but alive. Should have made sure I was dead, Graves gasped. He aimed at Kael's head. Rachel didn't think. She grabbed the handgun from her waistband, raised it with both hands the way Kael had taught her, and fired. The recoil jolted through her arms. The shot hit Graves in the throat. He dropped. This time, he didn't get back up. Rachel ran to Kael. He was conscious, but his breathing was labored, wet-sounding. The bullet had hit his chest, maybe pierced a lung. Jin, Rachel screamed. Get the medical kit, now! Jin was already moving. He pulled the kit from the van and brought it to Rachel. Her hands shook as she ripped open Kael's shirt. The wound was bad, sucking chest wound, blood bubbling with each breath. If she didn't seal it, his lung would collapse completely. Stay with me, she said. Her voice was steady, even though her hands weren't. Kael, look at me. Stay with me. Kael's eyes found hers. Rachel, don't talk. Save your strength. She worked with desperate efficiency, using everything she'd learned in medical school. She packed the wound, applied pressure, created a seal with plastic wrap and tape. Improvised, but effective. We need to get him to a hospital, Jin said. No hospitals, Kael gasped. They'll arrest. Then you'll die, Rachel said flatly. Better than prison? Shut up. Rachel pressed harder on the wound. You don't get to die. Not after everything. Not after... Her voice broke. You don't get to die. Kael's hand found hers. His grip was weak, but present. Rachel, he whispered. Thank you. For what? For being braver than me. Then his eyes rolled back and he went limp. No, Rachel said. She checked his pulse, faint but there. No, no, no. Kael, wake up. Wake up. Jin pulled her back gently. He's not dead, just unconscious. But we need to move, now, before the building collapses completely. Rachel looked at the facility. Flames were visible through the windows now, eating through the old wood and fabric inside. In minutes, the whole structure would come down. Get him in the van, she said. Together, she and Jin lifted Kael and carried him to the vehicle. They laid him across the back bench. Rachel climbed in beside him, keeping pressure on the wound. Drive, she told Jin. Anywhere, just drive. Jin floored it. The van lurched forward, tires squealing. Behind them, the facility groaned one final time and collapsed in on itself, flames shooting into the night sky. Rachel held Kael's hand and pressed on his chest wound and prayed to nothing in particular that he would survive. Because if he died after everything they'd been through, after she'd finally stopped being afraid, after she'd finally chosen to fight, she didn't know if she could survive it. The van raced through the darkness while Kael's blood soaked through Rachel's hands and the 14 rescued women huddled together, free but forever changed. And somewhere in the chaos, Rachel realized she was crying, not from fear or grief, but from rage. Rage at Graves for not dying the first time. Rage at herself for hesitating. Rage at a world that created monsters like the Circle in the first place. But most of all, rage at the thought of losing Kael now, when she'd just started to understand what he meant to her.
"Don't you dare die," she whispered, her lips close to his ear. "Don't you dare leave me alone in this."
Kael's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Jin's voice came from the front seat.
"There's a clinic, 40 minutes north, underground. They don't ask questions."
"Will he last that long?" Rachel asked.
Jin met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "He has to."
Rachel looked down at Kael's pale face, at the blood still seeping between her fingers despite the pressure she was applying. "Hold on," she whispered. "Please, just hold on." The van flew through the night, carrying its cargo of broken survivors toward an uncertain dawn. And Rachel held Kael's hand and refused to let go, because if she let go, if she stopped fighting for even 1 second, she knew exactly what would happen. She'd lose him, and she couldn't survive that. Not now, not after everything. So she held on with blood-slicked hands and shaking arms and a heart that beat with only one rhythm. Live, live, live. The clinic was exactly what Jin had promised. Underground, anonymous, and staffed by people who'd learned long ago not to ask questions. Rachel watched the doctor work on Kael with steady hands and clinical detachment, extracting the bullet, repairing the damaged lung tissue, stitching layers of muscle and skin back together with the precision of someone who'd done this 100 times before. She stood in the corner of the small operating room, her clothes still soaked with Kael's blood, and didn't move. Couldn't move. If she moved, if she looked away even for a second, she was certain he would die. "He's stable," the doctor finally said. She was in her 50s, gray-haired, with the kind of face that had seen too much suffering to be shocked by anything. "The lung is repaired. No major vessels were hit. He got lucky." Rachel's knees nearly gave out. "He's going to live? If infection doesn't set in, yes." The doctor stripped off her gloves. "But he needs rest. Real rest. Not whatever war you people are fighting." Jin stepped forward. "How long before he can move?" 2 weeks minimum. 4 would be better." "We don't have 4 weeks." The doctor's expression hardened. "Then you don't have a patient. Your choice." She left the room. Rachel moved to Kael's bedside and looked down at his unconscious face. He was pale, his breathing shallow but steady. Alive.
"The women," Rachel said without looking at Jin. "Where are they?" "Safe house in Queens. Minjun's with them. They're getting medical attention, food, clean clothes." Jin paused. "What they need after that, that's going to take more than we can give them."
Rachel knew he was right. She'd lived through the same trauma these women were experiencing now. She knew the nightmares didn't end just because you escaped the physical prison. The real cage was in your head, and no amount of medical care could unlock it. "I want to talk to them," Rachel said. "You need rest too." "I need to see them." Rachel's voice was firm. "They need to know what happens next. They need to know they're not alone." Jin studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Tomorrow, after you've slept." But Rachel didn't sleep. She sat beside Kael's bed through the night, watching his chest rise and fall, listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor. Every time his breathing hitched, every time the rhythm changed even slightly, her own heart stopped. Around dawn, his eyes opened. Rachel leaned forward. "Hey." Kael blinked slowly, trying to focus. His voice when he spoke was rough, barely above a whisper. "Did we got them all," Rachel said. 14 women, all safe. The facility is destroyed." Kael's eyes closed again. "Graves?" "Dead. I made sure this time." Something that might have been a smile crossed Kael's face. "You're getting good at this. Don't talk. You need to rest." "Rachel." Kael's hand moved weakly toward hers. She took it, his fingers cold against her palm. "I need to tell you later, when you're stronger." "No, now." Kael's eyes opened again, more focused this time. "In case there is no later." Rachel's throat tightened. "There will be." The doctor said, "Listen." Kael's grip tightened slightly. "When I saw you in Grand Central, I thought I'd found proof. Proof I'd failed. Proof the nightmare wasn't over." Rachel waited, not trusting her voice. "But you weren't proof of my failure." Kael's breathing was labored, but his words were clear.
You were proof that someone could survive it, could come out stronger. I'm not stronger, Rachel said. I'm broken. We're both broken. Kael's thumb traced across her knuckles. But we're still here, still fighting. That's what matters. Rachel felt tears burning her eyes. You don't get to die. Not after making me care about you.
Not planning to die. Kael's smile was faint but real. Too stubborn. Good. Because I need you to keep being stubborn for a very long time. Kael's eyes started to close again. Stay? I'm not going anywhere, Rachel said. She held his hand while he drifted back into unconscious sleep, and this time when he woke, it wouldn't be to violence or chaos or the sound of gunfire. It would be to something resembling peace, or at least the closest thing to peace people like them could find. 3 days later, Rachel finally went to see the women they'd rescued. The safe house was a converted warehouse in an industrial section of Queens, nondescript on the outside, but inside it had been transformed into something almost comfortable. Beds, clean bathrooms, a kitchen stocked with real food. Min Jun met her at the door. He looked exhausted but relieved. They're in the main room, he said. Some are sleeping. Others are, I don't know, existing, I guess. Rachel walked inside and found herself facing 14 women in various states of physical and emotional trauma. Some sat on beds staring at nothing. Others clustered together in small groups, talking in low voices. A few looked up when Rachel entered. One of them, the young girl who'd asked Rachel for help in the corridor, stood and walked over. You came back, the girl said. I promised I would. The girl's eyes filled with tears. I thought, when you didn't come right away, I thought you'd forgotten about us. Rachel felt something crack inside her chest. I could never forget you, any of you. She spent the next 4 hours talking to each woman individually, learning their names, their stories, the lives they'd been stolen from. Some had been missing for weeks, others for months. One had been gone for almost a year. What happens to us now? Asked a woman named Sarah. She was older, maybe 35, with haunted eyes and scars on her arms that looked identical to Rachel's. Rachel took a breath. That's up to you. But I can tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going back to medical school. I'm going to finish my degree, and then I'm going to open a clinic specifically for survivors, people who've been through what we've been through. You were one of them? Sarah asked. One of us? Rachel pulled back her sleeve, showing the needle scars. Then she pushed her hair aside, revealing the burn mark on her cheek. I was in the Bronx facility for 6 months, Rachel said quietly. I know what they did to you. I know what it feels like to be drained until you're too weak to fight. I know the nightmares. I know all of it. The room went silent. 14 women stared at Rachel with expressions that shifted from shock to recognition to something that looked almost like hope. How did you survive? Someone asked. Rachel thought about Grand Central Terminal, about collapsing into Kael's arms, about the months of violence and fear and slowly learning to fight back. I got angry, she said. I stopped being afraid, and I got angry. And I used that anger to fuel everything else, getting stronger, learning to protect myself, making sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else. Is that enough? Sarah asked. Just being angry? No, Rachel admitted. Anger gets you through the first part, but after that you need something else. You need a reason to keep going beyond just revenge. What's your reason? Rachel looked at the 14 faces watching her. You are, she said. All of you. Every person who survived and every person who didn't. You're why I'm still fighting. One by one, the women started asking questions about medical care, about therapy, about how to contact their families, about what legal protections they had. Rachel answered what she could and promised to find answers to the rest. When she finally left the safe house 6 hours later, the sun was setting. Jin was waiting outside in the car. How was it? He asked. Hard, Rachel said, but necessary. They drove back to the clinic in silence. When they arrived, Rachel found Kael awake and sitting up slightly, his color better than it had been in days. You went to see them, he said. It wasn't a question. I did. How are they? Traumatized, scared, but alive. Rachel sat in the chair beside his bed. They asked about you, about the man who saved them. Kael's expression darkened. I didn't save them. I just moved them from one nightmare to another. No, you gave them a chance to survive. What they do with that chance is up to them. Rachel leaned forward. Just like what I do with mine is up to me. Kael studied her face. You've changed. So have you. Have I? Rachel thought about the cold, controlled man who'd caught her in Grand Central. Then she looked at the person in front of her now. Still dangerous, still haunted, but no longer quite so alone. You're learning to live with it, she said. The guilt, the violence. You're not drowning in it anymore. I'm not sure that's better. It is. Trust me. Over the next week, Kael healed slowly but steadily. The doctor cleared him to move around, then to leave the clinic entirely. Jin found them a temporary apartment in Brooklyn, anonymous, secure, far from anyone who might be looking for them. Rachel spent her days coordinating care for the rescued women and her nights researching what it would take to actually open the trauma clinic she'd described. The logistics were overwhelming: licensing, funding, staffing, finding a location. But every time she thought about giving up, she remembered the faces in that safe house. She couldn't give up. Not on them, not on herself. One evening, 2 weeks after the Bronx facility burned, Kael found her sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by medical journals and grant applications. You're serious about this, he said. Rachel looked up. Why wouldn't I be? Because it's hard. Because trauma care is expensive and most funding goes to traditional therapy, not specialized clinics for trafficking survivors. Then I'll find non-traditional funding. Kael smiled slightly. I might know some people. Criminals? Former criminals, mostly. Kael sat down across from her. I've been thinking about what you said, about building something instead of destroying it. Rachel set down her pen. And I think you're right. I've spent years tearing things apart. My father's empire, the circle, anyone who stood in my way. He paused. Maybe it's time to create something instead. Like what? A foundation, legitimate, focused on supporting survivors of trafficking and abuse. Legal aid, medical care, housing assistance, everything the system should provide but doesn't. Rachel stared at him. You're talking about using your family's money to fix some of the damage my father caused. Yes. Kael's expression was serious. I can't undo what he did. Can't bring back the people who died because of his greed. But I can make sure his legacy becomes something other than just blood and suffering. Rachel felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope, but close to it. That's going to take years, she said. I know. It's going to be hard. I know. People are going to question your motives. They're going to call it blood money. Let them. Kael's voice was steady. I don't care what people call it as long as it works. Rachel stood and walked around the table. She sat down beside Kael and took his hand. Okay, she said. Let's build something. 4 months passed. The Min Foundation officially launched in September with an endowment of $50 million. Money Kael had seized from his father's offshore accounts and laundered through legitimate channels. The foundation's first initiative was a grant program for trafficking survivors, providing medical care, housing, and legal support. Rachel was named the foundation's director of medical programs. Her first project was opening the clinic she'd envisioned, a trauma care center in Lower Manhattan staffed entirely by doctors and therapists who specialized in treating survivors of extreme violence. It took 3 months of negotiations, paperwork, and renovation, but in December, the Vail Center for Trauma Recovery opened its doors. All 14 women from the Bronx facility were among the first patients. Rachel stood in the center's lobby on opening day, looking at the clean white walls, the comfortable waiting room, the exam rooms equipped with the latest medical technology. It didn't erase what had happened to her, didn't make the scars disappear or the nightmares stop. But it was something. It was a beginning. Kael appeared beside her, his shoulders still healing but functional. He'd been working 18-hour days getting the foundation operational, and it showed in the exhaustion carved into his features. You did it, he said quietly. We did it, Rachel corrected. They stood in silence for a moment, watching staff members prepare for the first appointments. Do you ever think about going back, Rachel asked, to the way things were before? Before Grand Central? Before all of it. Before your sister died. Before your father built his empire. Kael was quiet for a long moment. Every day, but I can't go back. None of us can. We can only move forward. Is this moving forward? Building clinics and foundations? I don't know. Kael looked at her. Does it feel like it? Rachel thought about the 14 women who would walk through these doors seeking help, about the hundreds more who would come after them, about the small, incremental changes that might actually save lives. Yeah, she said. It does. That night, Kael took Rachel to dinner at a small restaurant in the West Village. It was the first time they'd been out in public together without constantly looking over their shoulders, and Rachel found herself almost relaxed. I need to tell you something, Kael said over dessert. Rachel's stomach tightened. That sounds ominous. It's not. Or, I don't think it is. Kael set down his fork. I'm leaving New York. Rachel's heart stopped. What? Not forever, just for a while. There are trafficking operations in other cities that need to be shut down. Baltimore, Philadelphia, Boston. I can't do that from here. So you're going back to it. The violence? The war. I'm finishing what we started, Kael said. Making sure the circle is destroyed completely. Not just in New York, but everywhere. Rachel felt something cold settle in her chest. And what happens to us? Kael reached across the table and took her hand. That depends on what you want. I want you to stay, Rachel said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. I want you to choose peace instead of war. I want that too, Kael said. But I can't stop fighting. Not yet. Not while there are still women being drained in basements across the country. Rachel pulled her hand back. So this is it? You're just leaving? I'm asking you to wait for me, Kael said. To give me time to finish this. And then he stopped. Then what? Then I'll come back and we'll build something together, not just a foundation, a life. Rachel stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. Part of her wanted to scream at him for choosing violence over her. Part of her understood exactly why he couldn't stop, because she felt the same pull, the same need to keep fighting until every last trace of the circle was burned to ash. How long? She asked. A year, maybe less. And you'll come back? I promise. Rachel looked into Kael's eyes and saw the truth there. He meant it. But she also saw the exhaustion, the guilt, the bone-deep need to atone for his father's sins. Okay, she said quietly. 1 year. But you check in every week. You let me know you're alive. I will. And when you come back, Rachel's voice cracked. When you come back, you're done. No more wars, no more burning things down. Kael smiled. Deal. They finished dinner and walked through the city streets, hand in hand, not talking. When they reached Rachel's apartment, Kael pulled her close and kissed her. Not with the desperate urgency of their previous kisses, but with something slower, deeper. A promise. I love you, he said when they broke apart. Rachel's breath caught. You've never said that before. I know. I should have. Kael's hand cupped her face, his thumb tracing the scar on her cheek. I've loved you since the moment you stopped being afraid, since you chose to fight instead of run. Rachel felt tears burning her eyes. I love you too, even though you're a stubborn, self-destructive idiot who can't let go of the past. Kael laughed, a real laugh, the kind Rachel hadn't heard from him in months. I'll work on that, he said. You better. He kissed her again, and Rachel tried to memorize everything about this moment. The way his hands felt against her skin, the sound of his breathing, the taste of coffee on his lips. Because tomorrow he would leave, and she wouldn't see him again for a year. Tomorrow, she would go back to being alone. But tonight, just for tonight, they had each other. Kael left the next morning before dawn. Rachel woke to find a note on her pillow and an envelope on the kitchen counter. The note was short. Thank you for saving me. The envelope contained a check for $2 million made out to the Vail Center for Trauma Recovery. Rachel sat at the kitchen table and cried for the first time since the night in the bunker. Then she got up, washed her face, and went to work. The months that followed were brutal. Rachel threw herself into the clinic with single-minded focus, working 16-hour days, seeing patients, training staff, expanding services. The Vale Center grew from a small clinic to a comprehensive treatment facility with counseling services, legal aid, and a residential program for survivors who had nowhere else to go. Every week, Kael called. Sometimes the conversations lasted hours, sometimes just minutes. But he always called, and Rachel always answered. He told her about the facilities he'd found in Baltimore, 3 of them, all operating under different names but connected to the same supply chain. About the firefight in Philadelphia that had left him with a knife wound across his ribs. About the women he'd rescued in Boston and the detective who'd helped him instead of arresting him. Rachel told him about the clinic's expansion, about Sarah, who'd started working as a peer counselor after 6 months of intensive therapy, about the grant they'd received from a major foundation, about the nights she still woke up sweating from nightmares of concrete rooms and needles. "It gets better," Kael said during one late-night call. "The nightmares. They don't go away, but they fade." "How long did it take you?" Rachel asked. "I'll let you know when it happens." Rachel laughed despite herself. 10 months after Kael left, Rachel received a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer it, but something made her pick up. "Rachel Vale?" A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "Yes?" "This is Agent Chen with the FBI. I need to speak with you about Kael Min." Rachel's heart stopped. "What happened? He's alive, but he's in federal custody. He turned himself in this morning." Rachel sat down hard. "What?" "He walked into our field office in Boston and confessed to multiple murders, weapons charges, and organized crime activity spanning the last 3 years." Agent Chen paused. "He also provided evidence of an international trafficking ring and the names of 17 corrupt law enforcement officials." Rachel couldn't breathe. "Why would he?" "He said he wanted to make sure the circle was destroyed completely, that no one could rebuild it, and the only way to guarantee that was to hand over everything he knew." Agent Chen's voice softened slightly. "He also said to tell you he's sorry, that he couldn't keep his promise." Rachel hung up and called Jin immediately. "I know," Jin said before she could speak. "I tried to stop him. He wouldn't listen." "Where is he?" "Federal Detention Center in Manhattan. But Rachel, he's not getting out. He confessed to everything. He's looking at 20 years minimum." 20 years. Rachel felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "I need to see him," she said. "They won't let you. Not yet. He's in interrogation." Rachel paced her apartment, her mind racing. Kael had given himself up, had chosen prison over freedom because it was the only way to ensure the circle could never rebuild. He'd chosen to finish the war, even if it meant destroying himself in the process. It took 3 weeks before Rachel was allowed to visit. She went through security, surrendered her phone and bag, and was led to a small visiting room with a glass partition and a phone system that looked like it belonged in the 80s. Kael appeared on the other side of the glass wearing an orange jumpsuit, his face thinner but his eyes clear. Rachel picked up the phone. "You're an idiot," Kael smiled. "Hello to you too." 20 years, Kael. You're going to prison for 20 years. Probably less. My lawyer thinks 15 with good behavior. That's not better. It's necessary. Kael's expression grew serious. The evidence I gave the FBI, it's going to bring down trafficking operations across 6 states. Corrupt cops, dirty politicians, the whole network. But the only way they'd take it seriously was if I put myself on the line. So you martyred yourself. I took responsibility for my actions. Kael's voice was calm. For everything I've done. Everything my father did. This is the price. Rachel felt tears burning her eyes. I didn't ask you to pay this price. I know, but I had to. Kael pressed his palm against the glass. You're building something good, Rachel. Something that matters. I couldn't let my past destroy that. Couldn't risk the circle coming back and undoing everything we've worked for. We were supposed to build it together. We did. The foundation, the clinic, that's us. Both of us. It doesn't stop just because I'm in here. You promised me a year, Rachel said. Her voice broke. You promised you'd come back. I wanted to. I tried. Kael's eyes were bright with unshed tears. But some promises are impossible to keep. They sat in silence, hands pressed against opposite sides of the glass, phones held to their ears. I'll wait for you, Rachel finally said. Don't. I'm not asking permission. Kael laughed sadly. You're just as stubborn as I am. I learned from the best. The guard signaled that their time was up. Rachel wanted to scream at them to give her more time, just a few more minutes, but she knew it wouldn't matter. I love you, Kael said. No matter what happens. No matter how long I'm in here, I love you. I love you too, Rachel said. And I'll be here when you get out. 15 years, 20 years, I don't care. I'll be here. Kael nodded, his jaw tight. Then the guard escorted him away and Rachel was left staring at an empty chair through scratched plexiglass. She drove back to the clinic and went directly to her office, sat down at her desk, stared at the wall. Then she pulled out a notepad and started writing. A proposal for a prison outreach program, medical care for incarcerated individuals, mental health support, reentry services. If Kael was going to spend the next 15 years in prison, she would make sure he wasn't alone. Make sure he had access to the same kind of care she was providing to trafficking survivors. Make sure that when he got out, there was still something worth coming back to. 5 years passed. The Vale Center expanded to 3 locations across New York. The Min Foundation grew from a single city initiative to a national organization working with law enforcement to identify and shut down trafficking operations. Rachel finished her medical degree and became a licensed physician specializing in trauma care. She visited Kael once a month, every month, for 5 years. They talked about everything and nothing, about the clinic's growth, about the books he was reading, about the therapy program he'd started for other inmates, about the nightmares that still came, less frequent now but never fully gone. And they talked about the future. When I get out, Kael said during one visit, I want to work for the foundation, not run it, just help. Maybe do outreach work, talk to at-risk youth about how easy it is to fall into that life. You'd be good at that, Rachel said. Think so? I know so. You scare people straight just by looking at them. Kael laughed. That's my gift. In the 7th year of Kael's sentence, the FBI case built from his testimony resulted in the conviction of 43 individuals involved in trafficking operations. The judge in Kael's case took note and reduced his sentence to 10 years with parole eligibility at 8. Rachel cried when she got the call. 8 years, just 3 more to go. She could survive 3 more years. On a cold December morning, 8 years after Kael turned himself in, Rachel stood outside the correctional facility waiting for his release. Jin was beside her, older now, grayer, but still steady. Min Jun was there too, along with Sarah and 5 other women from the original rescue. The gates opened. Kael walked out wearing civilian clothes that hung slightly loose on his frame. He'd lost weight, gained new scars, and looked older than his years. But when he saw Rachel, his face transformed. He crossed the distance between them in long strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. You waited, he said into her hair. I told you I would. 8 years. I'd have waited longer. Kael pulled back and looked at her face, his hands framing her cheeks. You're more beautiful than I remembered. You're a terrible liar. I'm serious. His thumb traced the scar on her cheek, the mark that had connected them in the first place. You're everything good I never thought I'd deserve. Rachel kissed him, and it felt like coming home. They drove back to Manhattan together. Kael stared out the window, taking in the changes to the city. New buildings, new construction, the relentless march of time. The foundation wants to offer you a job, Rachel said. If you're interested, community outreach, working with survivors, talking about your experience. You sure that's a good idea? Kael asked. Ex-con with a murder conviction working for a trauma foundation? I'm sure, Rachel said firmly. Your past doesn't define your future. Only you get to do that. Kael was quiet for a moment. I'd like that. Working with survivors. Trying to help them avoid the mistakes I made. Then it's yours. They arrived at Rachel's apartment, the same one she'd lived in 8 years ago, though she'd renovated and expanded it since then. Kael walked through slowly, touching furniture, looking at photographs on the walls. You kept all of them, he said, pausing at a picture of the 2 of them taken before he'd turned himself in. Of course I did. Kael turned to face her. What now? Rachel took his hand. Now we live. We work. We keep building. We survive. Just survive? No. Rachel smiled. We do more than survive. We thrive. 6 months later, Rachel and Kael stood together at the opening ceremony for the Min Foundation's newest initiative, a national hotline for trafficking victims staffed by trained counselors and survivors. The program had been Kael's idea, developed during his time in prison. "We can't save everyone," Kael said during his speech. "We can't undo the damage that's already been done. But we can make sure that anyone who's suffering knows they're not alone, that there's a way out, that survival is possible." He looked at Rachel as he spoke, and she felt something click into place. The final piece of a puzzle that had been broken 8 years ago in Grand Central Terminal. They'd both been shattered, both been drained and broken and left for dead. But they'd survived. And in surviving, they'd built something that mattered, something that would outlast them both. After the ceremony, they walked through Central Park together, hand in hand, watching the city come alive in the spring sunshine. Kael stopped beneath a tree and pulled Rachel close. "Marry me," he said. Rachel's breath caught. "What?" "Marry me. Build a life with me. Not just the foundation, not just the work, everything. We're a disaster," Rachel said. "Both of us. We're traumatized and scarred, and we have nightmares." "I know. We'll probably drive each other crazy." "Probably. It's not going to be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is." Kael's eyes were steady, sure. "But I love you, and I want to spend whatever time I have left making sure you know that." Rachel felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you, even though you're stubborn and self-destructive and you have terrible taste in romantic gestures." Kael laughed and kissed her, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang out across the city. They married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the Vale Center, surrounded by survivors and staff and the people who'd helped them build something from ashes. Jin was Kael's best man. Sarah was Rachel's maid of honor. It wasn't perfect. Rachel still had nightmares. Kael still carried guilt that would never fully disappear. They both bore scars that would never fully heal. But they were alive. They were free. And they were together. 2 years after their wedding, Rachel stood in the main corridor of the Vale Center looking at a plaque on the wall. It listed the names of 47 women who'd been rescued from circle facilities over the past decade. 14 from the Bronx, 12 from Baltimore, 21 from operations across 6 other states. 47 lives saved. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. There were thousands more still suffering, still trapped, still waiting for someone to find them. But it was something. It was a beginning. Kael appeared beside her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one, and they stood together in comfortable silence. "Do you ever regret it?" Rachel asked. "Everything that happened? The choices you made?" Kael thought for a long moment. "I regret the people I couldn't save. I regret the time I lost. But I don't regret meeting you. I don't regret fighting, and I don't regret building this." He gestured at the clinic around them, the exam rooms filled with patients, the counseling centers where survivors learned to reclaim their lives, the training rooms where doctors learned to recognize signs of trafficking. "This is your legacy," Rachel said, "not your father's crimes, not the violence. This." Kael pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "Our legacy." "Our legacy," Rachel agreed. They stood together in the center they'd built from blood and survival and the absolute refusal to let darkness win. Outside, New York City hummed with life, millions of people living their stories, fighting their battles, surviving their own nightmares. And inside the Vale Center, 47 women had found a path back to life. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no magic that erased the scars or made the nightmares disappear. There was just the hard, unglamorous work of healing, of choosing to get up every morning and keep fighting even when it felt impossible. But Rachel had learned something in the years since Grand Central Terminal. Survival wasn't about being unbroken. It was about being broken and choosing to live anyway. It was about taking the shattered pieces of yourself and building something new, something stronger, something that mattered. She looked at Kael, the man who'd caught her when she fell, who'd shown her that strength came from choosing to fight back, who'd loved her even when she was at her most broken. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Rachel smiled. "Yeah, let's go home." They walked out of the clinic together into the winter evening. Snow was starting to fall, covering the city in white, transforming it into something clean and new. And for the first time since that terrible night in June 8 years ago, Rachel felt something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Not the naive hope of someone who'd never been broken, but the hard-earned hope of someone who'd survived hell and come out the other side with her humanity intact. The kind of hope that understood darkness but chose light anyway. The kind of hope that built trauma centers and foundations and new lives from the ashes of old ones. The kind of hope that said, I was prey once, I was a victim, I was broken and drained and left for dead, but I survived. And in surviving, I became something more than what they tried to make me. I became free. Rachel took Kael's hand as they walked through the snow-covered streets of Manhattan, heading home to the life they'd built together, messy and imperfect and absolutely real. Behind them, the Vale Center's lights glowed warm against the darkness. A beacon for the broken, a promise for the lost, a reminder that survival was possible, that healing was possible, that life after trauma was possible, and that sometimes the people who save you are the ones who are just as broken as you are, but choose to keep fighting anyway. The snow fell softly on the city, covering everything in white, and Rachel Vale, survivor, doctor, warrior, walked into her future with her hand in Kael's, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together, not as victim and savior, but as two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to build something that mattered in the light. And that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.